Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here, recording another session of 1-2 No Limit, 6 Max regular tables on Ignition. Our tables are up and running, so let's jump right in. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet after the big blind calls are cut off open. Lower left-hand table, we're going to be 3-betting the button open with ace-10 suited pretty much from any position, certainly against a button open. Although I might be a bit tighter than typical, as we've already had a bit of activity from this player back and forth so far that makes me think he might be a little bit wacky or button clicky. We're going to go ahead and range bet on the Jack-8 3-2 tone flop. We've got a lot of backdoor draws here to continue barreling with on the turn. Turn is an interesting card in that we should definitely have some 9-10 here as well to have the nuts, as well as pocket jacks, ace-jack, king-jack, queen-jack type hands, and some overcards. I think I want to go ahead and keep barreling this particular combo as well, just with the gut shot, the overcard. I'm going to open kings in the upper right-hand table. Tag this guy as a recreational player based on his short stack and his limps. I'm going to fold the small blind against the cutoff open in the lower left-hand table. That's a 3-better fold situation. An ace-8's probably a bit too loose, especially if I think the guy is on the fishy side. 3.5x open isolation raise, essentially, from a middle position player. I can go ahead and defend this particular combo, though I am not going to be defending all that wide against that size. Upper right-hand table, out of position against a couple players. I'm just going to check range even with my overpair, and I'm going to check my range in the lower right-hand table after defending the big blind. Upper right-hand table, after the flop checks through, I'm going to now start stabbing with my overpair. And for a board that coordinated with bottom pair and a real healthy bet size like we see here, I'm just going to go ahead and fold. Maybe a bet on the tight side. If that board was less coordinated, or if I had better backdoor equity, I think I might call. If I had a hand like 8-9, Jack-10, Jack-10, a pair and a gut shot type, essentially, I'd continue. I'm just going to go ahead and fold this on the tight side. Let's see here. We've got 4 to the straight on the upper right-hand table, so I'm just going to go ahead and check and try to show this down. I'm not going to try to value bet thin, not going to try to bluff him off 2 pair. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind. We're going to be opening. No reason to deviate from a standard open at this point as of yet. I don't know too much about this big blind after one orbit through the table. So I'm going to open a very standard low to mid 40% range. Queens, of course, is very clearly in that open range. I'm going to be playing raise first thin or fold. I'm not using a limp complete range blind on blind. Although some players do that, there may be some merit to it. I just don't know that it adds a whole lot to your strategy's value while adding an awful lot of complexity. Lower right-hand table, we're on the button with 6-7 offsuit. It's a little bit outside of a standard open. I have no reason to think these blinds are particularly fishy or tight or nitty or anything like that, so I'm not going to expand my range. Against this lower left-hand table, blind on blind spot, king-queen suited is a very fine hand to re-raise, even though, and especially because the players seem to be a bit button-clicky, I think he might be a bit fishy. We're looking to make a hand like top pair and get a lot of money in against this guy, or, of course, a big pat hand or a big draw. We're going to go ahead and range bet on the Queen 7-3 rainbow flop. Not really going anywhere on very, very many runouts, although the ace turn card is probably one of the worst cards for us. We now no longer have the top pair. He could have some kind of random ace-x, check call float hands. We're going to go ahead and check this back now. Looking to improve, that's obviously a good card. I'm not very worried about Jack-10, given the way the action played. So I'm very comfortable my hand is good here. I just want to go ahead and value bet this. Trying to decide if there's any merit to an overbet jam. I would continue betting all my strong hands. On the turn, all my hands that are strong on the river are going to keep being bet on the turn. My sets, my good 2 pairs, my Jack-10 would mostly keep betting. So I'm not going to have an overbet size here because I don't really have nut-type hands in this line for the most part. I'm just going to bet 2/3, try to get called by some random pair that doesn't believe me. And this particular player has been wacky and button clicky and check raised the river before on me in a hand just before we turn the stream on. I've got a pretty strong hand. Could he have backed into Jack 10 here somehow? Could he have some kind of aces up hand? Yeah. But given this guy's been active and spazzy and I've got this broken aggression line that doesn't seem that strong and he's check raised the river before, I am going to go ahead and call this off. And he got there with Jack 10, which is a very interesting way to play that hand, but more power to him. Upper right-hand table, we isolated the limper on the button with our King-Jack. We got called by the big blind, who seems to be on the looser, weaker reg side, if not a recreational player. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. The turn is an interesting card as it puts 3 to the flush out there. We no longer have top pair. We have second pair, and we've got, a club kicker. I don't want to use overbet size on this flush closing turn, as he could have a lot of flushes just as we could as well. Our nut advantage is not so strong. It's not so heavily weighted where we have much more strong nut type hands than he does any longer. So I want to use a 2/3 size bet. I'm going to be betting my flushes, my sets for the most part, most of my 2 pairs. In a second pair kind of hand with the club kicker, I'm content to check back just because I can call on pretty much any club. I can check down or try to value bet my second pair based on the run out. I don't think there's any real reason to bet that kind of hand there. I may try to go for thin value here, try to get called by a weaker king, some random middling pocket pair with the club. I'm not going to put him on too much ace-x, especially when it's the ace of clubs that hits on the turn. I think his ace-x that calls has the ace of club in it, which he, of course, can't have with that on the board. I'm going to go ahead and try to value bet a bit on the thin side here. Lower right-hand table, face a 2.5x open from the button. We're on the big blind. Only decision is if I want to go ahead and flat this or 3-bet it. He's been fairly passive so far, but we really haven't played that many hands. I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this, which would be a standard from a button open. If he's a bit tighter or against a cutoff open type player, you could maybe flat this instead. I think it's pretty close either way. As long as you don't fold, you can either 3-bet it or call it. We've got the 7-6-4 board, which is not a particularly great board for us. I'm going to go ahead and actually range check this, which is something I'm starting to work on bad boards for us. Out of position is a 3-bet raiser. Historically, I would just go ahead and range bet all these boards with initiative, even these bad middling connected boards. Given that my hand doesn't have any kind of real backdoor equity, I don't have the ace of hearts or anything like that. I think it's okay just to check fold this on a board that can congested. It's also a case where I was pretty close between 3-betting or just calling pre-flop, so I think this guy might not be quite as wide as a typical button opener. There's at least some reason to think that. This all pushes me a bit more into that check range as opposed to bet. And against a bet, even the small bet, just with nothing really going on for this hand, I'm just going to go ahead and check fold and go on to the next one. Gets the 3x under the gun open the lower left-hand table. We're going to play 3-bet or fold on the button, and I'm not going to be 3-betting a hand, a hand anywhere nearly as weak as Queen-6 suited, so that's an easy fold. But I wouldn't really have flats there, especially not for that size. Got a 3x open over here from kind of a passive player, but on the button. We're going to go a bit tighter than we usually do for our for defending against the button open here, but we'll still 3-bet this particular hand. Probably 3-bet something like a 10% range against this guy, of which ace-queen offsuit is going to be in there, though probably about one of the worst offsuit Broadway cards that we're going to 3-bet. I think I would just call with ace-jack and king-queen. King-8, 3, 2-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. Got instantly called. The hands I'm going to keep betting with on this turn are going to be... I'm going to trap my pocket kings. I don't really have any trip 3s. I probably don't really have any 8s full. I would keep betting my aces as it doesn't block the kings. I'd keep betting my ace-king, and I would keep betting a lot of my diamond draws, especially the diamond draws that haven't paired up with the king as well. Ace-queen I think is just a bit too weak to keep bluffing, especially with no real equity here in this spot and the player who may be on the more tight passive side pre-flop. Now on the river, that third diamond hits. We could beat a lot of middling pairs in his range, a lot of 8x or a lot of mid pairs. We don't really have showdown value here. I'm going to go ahead and just bet this and take a stab at it. I think it's more profitable than trying to show down ace high. Get instantly jammed all in. We probably ran into a flush. Just going to go ahead and fold that. There's obviously no decision there with ace high with that kind of line. That is probably not very bluffy. It's probably under bluffed. Lower left-hand table, blind down, blind spot. King 7's a bit wider than I would open as a standard, but this guy's been pretty tight through the first couple of orbits, so we're going to go ahead and expand our range and open it, and then we're going to check our range on the Queen 8-5 rainbow board. Lower left, or upper right-hand table rather, blind down blind, 9-7 suited's a pretty easy open. And against that small bet, it's so small. We've got overcards, some backdoor straight type cards. I'm actually going to go ahead and call this, also thinking I can perhaps put a play in on the river if he checks back the turn. That's actually a pretty decent card for us to check raise bluff just because we block hands like King Jack now that might continue. So I may think about putting in a bluff with this hand. King 8 would be better, given that I would also block hands like Jack 8. I've got just great removal to all the nuts. Nothing to do now except go ahead and just try to bluff him off. Given that that board paired on the river, that queen, I think he doesn't have too many queens in his range. I think he finds a lot of calls with 10x, 9x type hands, or maybe even 5x. So I want to go ahead and use an overbet size for my bluff. I'm probably not betting worse than a trip queen type hand here very much. Maybe some real good 10s. My value range is going to be much more polarized in that spot, so I think it justifies using that overbet size. Upper right-hand table, we open Queen 8 suited from the cutoff. We got called by the big blind. We're going to go ahead and bet small with our range on 7-5-3 in position with initiative. And we've got some backdoor outs and overcards to help bail us out if he comes along. Now the turn is interesting. We don't really have 6-4. He should have some combos of that. We've probably got all the sets. However, he could really have 7-5s and 3s that were not in fact raised on the flop. He could slow pay those reasonably. We should have all the pocket queens. We should both have Queen 7. He should probably have a bit more Queen 5 and Queen 3 than I would have. I wouldn't really call with those, and he may call with a decent number of them. I don't think I want to overbet here, given all that. I think I want to use a 2/3 size. And this is also going to be one of my worst queens. In fact, I think it's my very worst queen, so I'm content to check back some of my weaker top pairs to sort of induce bluffs, under-rep them to bet the river. Lower left-hand table, we get 3x 3-bet in position. I'm going to be very tight against these, especially against a player who's been tight himself. However, Jacks is too good to fold. We're obviously not folding that. I don't want to 4-bet it. Just want to go ahead and call. And now we face a bet on a 4 to the straight type board. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a call for that sizing, even though that texture is not going to be very bluffy. Given that the player on the lower left-hand table checked back, I'm going to go ahead and start putting some money in now with my top full house. I want to see the 4 straight river is a little under bluff, but not too badly. Check call, check bet line is pretty neutral. That sizing is pretty bluff heavy. We're going to go ahead and call this down. We're beat some of the time, but we really just can't be folding. And now this player goes ahead and he calls the turn bet. Now the question is, what do we do on the river? Whether we overbet. Actually, I think I want to get kind of tricky and sort of trap against this guy. He may bluff with the naked ace of diamonds. He may value bet if he hit ace queen. You know, if he's got a strong hand that's going to call, he's probably going to bet most of those anyway. I guess the only thing is I might get value from a hand like 10s, pocket 8s that won't bet when I check. I think it's okay to get kind of tricky trappy there with a hand that strong and against a player whose range is probably pretty tight. He had pocket 8s, so I'm probably not getting value from that whether I bet or whether I check. Where I'm really trying to get value from is a hand like ace queen, king queen that hit the queen, you know, if he's got an overpair like kings or aces that were tricky and check back the flop, he may try to get value from those. If he's got the flush, he's going to bet, though he's going to call off or raise with it either way, so that probably doesn't make a huge difference between bet and check. And if he had, you know, a naked ace of diamonds, if he's got a hand like ace-king with the ace or king of diamonds that was drawing, he may decide to turn that into a bluff on that river with little showdown value. So I think it's okay to actually kind of trap there, and, you know, I'm still going to get value from the hands that call me for the most part, and I think I may induce a few more bluffs, so I think it's okay to trap there with the jacks full. And it also tells me this guy's not quite as tight as I might have first thought. 3-bet in the eights there. That's a little on the loose side, so we'll take that into account. Blind on blind, 7-5 offsuit is probably just outside of a defense range for me against a 3x open. It's pretty close. You could defend it with the call. You could even throw it into a 3-bet range to have a few, you know, a smattering of some janky offsuit hands that aren't quite good enough to defend. I don't really mind anything you do with this as long as there's some rationale for it. I think it's probably a standard fold just outside the call or 3-bet range. Lower right-hand table, you get 3-bet to a large size to a 4x size. King-queen offsuit's a very easy fold against that. When he starts sizing up like that, I'm going to start calling even less than I normally do. I'm going to be a bit more inclined to 4-bet. I may 4-bet and stack off jacks when I might otherwise just call with them, given there's more money in the pot and we're more incentivized to 4-bet. But I'm also going to be much tighter with the calls, even though I'm already tight in that spot against an in-position 3-better. That larger size, I'm going to have such a small range of hands that continue for a call, and king-queen offsuit is not going to be one of them. Lower left-hand table, 7s is a standard open from the cutoff. Jack-8 suited in middle position. I think that's just outside of a standard open for me, but it's pretty close. We do have a player that's a bit special in the blinds, so I'm going to go ahead and expand ever so slightly to try to get into a pot with this guy because he may come along a bit too often. And like I said, this hand is very close. If you wanted to open as a standard from that spot, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Big blind calls me. We're going to go ahead and range bet small on the Jack-4 deuce two-tone. Lower right-hand table in the blind on blind spot. Jack-7's a little outside my standard open. This guy seems pretty standard reg so far, except for the fact that he hasn't really been 3-betting. So I guess that would be some reason to perhaps expand the range. Upper left-hand table, the fishy player is kind of short stack, and he's been loose, not enough fold equity. We don't know anything about the guy with the regular stack that hasn't played in the hand yet over one hand. We're just going to go ahead and not expand our range and fold that. If the fish was deeper, I would call. If the fish was nittier, I would call, or raise rather. I would continue and play that and expand my range. Here on the turn, I'm not going to be using an overbet size. I mean, I've got ace-5 and I've got a lot of the sets, but he could have just as much ace-5 as I can. He could have made some 2 pairs with that more than I can as well. That board just got more coordinated. I'm not going to use the overbet size. And I'm also going to check back some of my weakest top pairs, even in the more mergy, smaller size. So I'm going to check back Jack-8, which is probably my worst jack, as I expanded my range to include it pre-flop. I want to under-rep my hand to get value from it on the river against a middling pocket pair or something like ace-4, or to induce a bluff from missed hearts. 2.5x button lead, that's just an easy call for this hand with that size. Oh, and he was merging with second pair there, so he had a flush draw that whiffed but made second pair. If anything, I think he probably should have bet that a bit bigger if he was going for value, a half pot or 2/3, but I do agree that he should try to bet that and get value as played. But of course, our top pair that we under-repped is going to be easy hand to call down with in that spot, especially against such a very tiny sizing. 2.5x open from the button in the lower right-hand table. King 3 suited is going to be a very easy call, really not much argument for either raising or for folding. In the lower left-hand table, the small blind faces a button open. We can go ahead and re-raise with pretty much all of our suited aces, including Ace-7 suited, so that's what we're going to do. Have a roughly 15% 3-bet range in that spot. Let's see here. The lower right-hand table, he checked back a coordinated board. He's probably not very strong. My plan, absent a board texture changing card on the river, is going to be to sort of jab at this turn small and then overbet the river as a bluff, just because I don't think he has very many strong hands when he checks back the flop right there. And that small sizing is very powerful on the turn in these games, just because the pool, one, they don't fold that much, but they fold too often, and they don't raise it nearly often enough. So you get away with it. You get away with it sort of as an exploit, doing that a lot more than you should. A lot more than you should be able to get away with. Lower left-hand table, we open pocket fives from the button. On Jack 10-4, we're going to go ahead and range bet that small. Lower right-hand table, we're going to open 8-7 blind on blind. That's a fairly standard open for that spot. Though we could probably expand our range because this player hasn't 3-bet through 27 hands on, looks like 10 chances to do so. He hasn't done it yet. See, the lower left-hand table, we can have all the sets. We can have all combos of Jack 10. We can have Jack 4 suited. He should probably check raise some of those sets on the flop. He shouldn't really have too much jacks or tens because of the pre-flop action. So I think I can use an overbet size in that spot. Pocket fives has a good bit of showdown value, against weird ace-high, random straight draws that brick out, and even the pair of fours. So I'm going to check that back and use it to bluff catch depending on the river that hits. The ace is not a great card for us. He could have floated us with various ace-high or various straight draws. I guess like he could have some ace-queen that also were a straight draw on the flop, and now he rivered a pair. I still lose to the jacks and the tens. He's betting into me for pot. As far as I know, this player is a reg-type player. I'm going to take a look at some MDA real quickly here. But the pot size bet is about neutral. Against in a button versus blind situation, it's perhaps slightly overbluffed. But a triple Broadway board is going to be a lot less bluffy. An ace river overcard is less bluffy. My hand is just behind some value kind of stuff on the turn. I'm really looking to bluff catch against a hand like 8-9, Queen 9, or whiffed hearts. They're going to go ahead and fold. I guess it's somewhat close, but that texture to me is just not going to be that bluffy. The lower right-hand table, we made a pretty standard 3-bet or a squeeze against middle position open. We got flatted. We range bet small on 9-7-3. We're facing a check raise with no real equity, so it's going to be just fine to go ahead and fold that. The upper right-hand table, we opened ace-8 from the button. On Jack 8-7 two-tone, I went ahead and range bet small. I don't believe that's solver approved. I'm almost certain it's not, but the pool doesn't really punish me for those small bets, so I use them all over. It lets me protect my second pair there as well, against weird random gut shots, lower pairs that could improve, overcards. And if he's not going to check raise me enough, I think I can just go ahead and do that and get away with it. If you're playing a more polarized range, that's a fine hand to check back. It shouldn't be in a bet size second pair top kicker for a larger bet size. But if you're using the small size there, it's going to be okay. Upper left-hand table, ace-10 offsuits and open from the button. And we're going to open ace-10 offsuit again from the upper left-hand table, this time from the cutoff. None of these tables really seem all that particularly fishy at this point, so I'm going to start swapping some of them out. We're open king 10 suited in the upper left-hand table. Upper left-hand table, we're getting 3-bet in position. We're not going to call that very loosely. However, we're going to be a bit more aggressive with our 4-bets just because this guy's been very active in the first 2 4-bets. I'm going to play him, rather than get a bit tighter because we're against a nitty player pool, I'm going to drop into a more of a GTO defense range. I'm probably going to be stacking off here. Let me think about that. I think tens plus ace king is reasonable, and I would still be using ace queen offsuit and then some suited wheel aces as my bluff. Ace 10 offsuit just a bit too weak to defend. And then king 10 suited against a 3x, a little bit more than 3x, 3-bet in position. We can just go ahead and fold that from under the gun. Even against a GTO opponent, I think I would probably fold king 10 suited, I think, because it's just so hard to play out of position in 3-bet pots. Against a player pool that's probably a bit tighter, a player that hasn't 3-bet yet through the first couple of orbits. He's playing 28-12, so he's got some more nitty and passive pre-flop tendencies. I think it's going to be okay to just fold that, even if it was or granted we're folding that hand anyway, but I think we're going to go ahead and not expand our range against as compared to what we do against the player pool in general, because I don't think there's any reason to think that guy's particularly aggressive or loose. I'm going to leave this table that's up in the upper left-hand table. This player over here seems to be a recreational player. Well, it looks like he's sitting out already. I think perhaps it's too early to make that conclusion when he topped the stack back off. But we do have this guy who's been a bit active in special. His stats are showing to be a bit more reggy, so maybe he's just taking some weird, tricky, trappy lines. I'm going to leave him tagged for now, but just with a mental note in my head that we're not sure what to make of him yet. We're going to go ahead and range bet small against the small blind continue on 6-7-4. The small blind continue from a guy with reggy stats is probably some middling pairs. I'm going to look to move him off some of these pairs with overcards peel on the turn. I'm going to be very tight against the check raise, as he's probably very set heavy on that spot. Yeah, and against the ace now, when I think that he probably check raises his sets, and now he's going to have stuff like pocket fives for the draws, some random heart draws, and some middling pairs. I think I can go ahead and actually punish him. I'm going to get a little out of line here. I'm going to overbet this and look to move him off a hand on the river as well if he calls another one. I think that ace just scares so much of his middling pocket pair range that I'm going to get a bit wacky and just bully him. And we're going to fold the king 6 suited under the gun. And I'm actually just going to shuffle this table out too. I'm not convinced this guy is as wacky as I first thought he was, now that the stats are starting to normalize and he's got very reg-type pre-flop stats. And there's really no other apparent fish at the table. Lower right-hand table, we'll open king 10 offsuit from the cutoff. Get 3-bet in position by the button, so this is going to be a standard fold when it comes back to us. This 5 seat seems like a weak reg because of the wide V-pip pre-flop raise gap. The big blind seems like he's too loose, 44-31 over 17 hands. Lower right-hand table, get a min raise from under the gun. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet that's from our small blind. Reasonably tightly, but probably something like a 7 or 8% range. And we can have a suited wheel ace or two in there, with ace-5 suited being the best suited wheel ace. We're going to use that one as a pre-flop 3-bet bluff. Got quickly called, ace-9-3 two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet small and then probably play our hand more defensively on turns if he continues. Now, let's see here. On the 10 turn, we can trap with pocket aces. I continue barreling my sets of 9s, sets of 10s. I keep betting my ace-10 suited. I keep betting my ace-king. I'll check back to play more passively with my ace-5. And probably my ace-jack. Ace-queen could go either way. And then I can keep betting my queen-jack for my open-ended straight draws and some of those club Broadway draws, club combo Broadway draws, king-queen, king-jack. He bets 12 into 30, bets about 40%. We've got top pair. We need to be calling this at least once and evaluating the river. Not a great river as it coordinates with a lot of his hands that were bluffs. We're going to check again. We chop against a weak ace, ace-7. I think his defense with ace-7 there is a bit on the loose side. I'm going to I'm not going to give him a rec tag. I'm going to give him a yellow tag that tells me that he's a suspected rec as opposed to a confirmed rec at this point, just because that pre-flop play is very questionable to me, but that doesn't automatically imply that he's a fish necessarily. A lot of regs call pre-flops far too wide, especially in position. So not going to jump to any quick conclusions, but we are going to keep an eye on the guy. King 5, we're just going to fold in the button, the lower right-hand table. Lower left-hand table at 2.5x open. We're on the button. We're going to defend with ace 3. Probably re-steal with a couple suited wheel aces like ace 4 and ace 5 and defend the other suited aces. Upper right-hand table, jack 10's a steal in the blind on blind spot. Upper left-hand table, 9's is an open in the blind on blind spot as well. We have a gut shot, an ace high, an overcard, a backdoor flush draw. I think we should go ahead and check raise against a, not a real small, but a half pot sizing from a button open. I think that's a fine hand to check raise. We'll check range in the upper right-hand table. We'll open the button with ace 9 offsuit in the upper left-hand table. We're going to keep barreling on diamonds on the lower left-hand table and probably the 5 as well. We'll check fold the jack in the upper right-hand table, and we're going to fold to the 3-bet from the small blind in the upper left-hand table, especially with the overcaller. We're going to fold these marginal hands even more so with another guy in there robbing our equity. We didn't pick up any equity on the lower left-hand table, so we're just going to go ahead and check. River is a 7. There's some merit to betting here. I'm not sure that that line is particularly overfolded, though, and we don't rep very much, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and surrender this and not get myself into spots where I'm not quite sure where we're at as far as how the pool defends and that weird, check raise, check bet line. And that is almost, I'm trying to think what draws he could even have, hands worse than ace high that would just try to move you off with the cheap bluff. If there's any merit to hero calling with ace high. I mean, the most likely weak draws on the flop that continue would probably be something like 7-8, which now turned a pair. I think it's more likely he's trying to get thin value from a pair. I'm just going to go ahead and fold this. My range is not well thought out enough and well constructed where I have legitimate value to have some check raising range as well, and he may view it that way. I also don't know that a check raise is going to be very profitable just in a vacuum against the pool in this line, so I'm going to go ahead and fold. I'm content that my flop play was inherently profitable, and especially if I pick up equity that lets me barrel, I'm not going to get myself into bad spots where I defeat whatever good I did early in the hand on run-outs that don't favor me in scenarios that don't automatically favor me as well. Lower left-hand table, we open blind on blind with ace 10. Lower right-hand table, we defend a tight button open with the king 6 of diamonds. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open pocket 6s from middle position. Let's see here. There's really not a whole lot of bad rivers for a hand. I really would probe a ton of different combos on this turn after the flop check back, but I'm really not folding out any kind of aces or better hands with this. I may induce some bluffs. I'm not too worried about rivers. I can check call this and have diamonds in my check call range. I think it's okay to just be checking this hand and try to show it down. I'm going to even continue doing it one more time just so he could actually have some weak aces that check back twice. I'd rather check back and induce a bluff than try to get value with this particular combo. Lower left-hand table, we've got a cutoff limper rather with a small stack, 30 blinds. We're going to go ahead and isolate them on the button with ace-jack. Probably isolate like a 25 to 28% range, pretty much a standard cutoff open. Ace-jack-9 is a great flop for a hand. Pretty good flop for our range as well. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small after his check to us. Upper left-hand table, a 2.5x open from the cutoff is going to get 3-bet pretty aggressively, probably about 10%, including suited broadways like king-jack. Let me see here. On the lower left-hand table, he calls me. We're going to range bet Jack 9-9 upper left-hand table. I'm trying to decide my size. I'm going to keep betting the lower left-hand table because we're so short. A half-pot bet sets me up for a half-pot river jam. I think that's what I want to do, so I'm going to go ahead and half-pot and call off or half-pot the river on most rivers. The turn when he calls me, I'm going to go ahead and check. I'm really only worried about overcards, queens, or aces. I mean, a king is a decent card for me, even though it does make a straight. The low cards are all fine. I don't want to just start blasting into nines. I want to have some pretty decent call-down hands in my check range. A hand like king-jack I think is a good one to have in the check range to defend my checks. I would consider value betting some rivers. The queen, not so much, as now hands like king queen got there for a better pair. Straight draws like 10-8 got there. And you know, a hand like pocket sevens, pocket eights, a weaker jack. A weaker jack probably still calls, but those middling pairs now are going to be a bit more scared and probably check down. I'm just going to play this on the passive defensive side and check it. And evaluate the river if he goes ahead and bets. Lower right-hand table. I'm going to open threes under the gun. That's on the loose side, and you could fold it as well, and I wouldn't mind that. The river is pretty close over here. Like I said, he probably doesn't have too many nines that check back the turn, but I guess he could have some. I'm trying to think what hands he would really be turning into bluffs right here. A lot of his potential bluffs are no longer going to be bluffs. You know, the straight draw has either made a straight or made a pair that beats me. I don't know that ace high turns into a bluff. It's pretty close, and you want to talk yourself into making a tight fold. I could actually get behind that, given that putting them on bluffs is a bit tricky here. I guess you could have a hand like 7-8. That said, if it's close, I go ahead and call. I expect to be beat a decent portion of the time, but I am going to go ahead and call this. Yeah, a hand like ace queen got there on me. Lower right-hand table, we check range on the flop. Everybody checked through. We're going to go ahead and start betting now, especially with a hand as strong as the set. I'm going to be over-betting the river for the most part, unless maybe if it's a spade. Spade will probably bet smaller for value. Yeah, against the 8, I don't want to move him off weak top pairs, let him get away very cheaply. I'm going to go ahead and just bet more of a 2/3, 70% pot size on that river. Now, given that my stack is shorter, I'm going to actually play this more like a 4-better fold type situation and not have ace-king in my range. If I were 100 blinds deep, this would be a standard 3-bet, even from a guy who's been nitty from his button open. And I got called with Jack-9, so it's a shame I didn't get more value out of that hand. I think on a blank river, I'm going to get value when I overbet or maybe even get raised by top 2 and get a chance to stack off with the set. This is a guy who I thought was a suspected wreck. He doesn't have blatantly fishy stats yet, but he's probably playing a bit on the weaker reg type side. Not a true traditional fish, but a weaker reg, I think, is a fair characterization of this guy's play so far. Blind on blind, we're going to open 9-7 suited in the lower left-hand table. We could probably expand our range against this guy that's been very reserved pre-flop so far through the first couple of orbits, but even without expanding our range, we're going to play that hand in that spot. Against the middle position, 3x open, we're not gonna defend on the button with pocket sixes. It gets a bit closer with this caller in here, and if it was a smaller size, I might deviate and cold call, even though I usually play mostly 3-better fold from the button. But against a 3x open, I'm just not really going to have very many, if any, cold calls. I'm sure some of you would cold call there, and you could probably talk me into some reasons for doing so. However, you know, I'm going to stay away from it. Telling me I would hit my set when the flop comes out, that'd be a great reason to call had we known that. We, of course, have no way of knowing that, though. Lower left-hand table, we're going to open ace-6 suited from the cutoff. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open ace-king suited from under the gun. And that table also seems pretty weak, so we're going to go ahead and rotate it out. Lower left-hand table, 8-9 deuce two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet small against the big blind when he checks. We turned a hand that's got some degree of bluff catcher. A third pair is just so heavily in the check back range, whether we use an overbet or whether we use an overbet size or whether we're going to be using a more standard, a more merged range. Either way, I'm still not going to be betting my 6. Let's see. In this spot, I would have 9s, 8s, 6s, deuces, 9-8. I'd have 7-10 suited. He would have some of those hands. A lot of them are check raising the flop. I think I could actually overbet this particular turn. There's some merit for betting smaller because my hands like ace-9, king-9 want to bet and may not want to go in an overbet range. I could go either way on this, but I'm going to go ahead and check back to 6 regardless. We check call with ace-king, the backdoor flush draw on the upper left-hand table. And then we turn the backdoor flush draw. He checks down. Now we rivered top pair, top kicker. We're going to go ahead and try to bet that for some value. I'm going to take the short on with my 6. Lower right-hand table, we call the small 3-bet from the big blind with pocket 10s. No reason to 4-bet, especially against the smaller size. I'm not sure what's going on here, as I don't think I've had the action pop up, even though I've got the timer on me like it's my hand. I think the software is glitching out. And he bets a pretty healthy size. He bets about 80% on pot. Pocket 10s is still a bit too strong to fold, though I'm definitely thinking his range is a bit stronger for that size as opposed to a smaller sizing. We should be peeling at least once, though. Now, I could have 4-5 there, as I would open that from the cutoff and I would defend it against that small preflop 3-bet, so I've got that. I'm going to have all the sets except for aces. I'm going to continue preflop for a call with jacks, 3s, or deuces. So I've got those strong hands in my range. And I'm going to also have ace-jack suited. I probably also continue the flop with some of my combos of ace-5 and ace-4 suited, especially the ones with the backdoor flush draw. So I've got some middling top pair hands as well with weak kickers. I think the hands I'm going to start betting now are going to be my jacks, my 3s, my deuces, my 4-5. I'm going to be checking back and ace-jack I can also bet. Or ace-3, ace-deuce. I guess I would have those as well. I could start betting those, but the weaker one-pair hands, I'm so much more worried that he can have hands like ace-king, ace-queen in his range pre-flop when I really shouldn't have as much of it. I guess I would call some of those pre-flop. But I'm going to have those, I'm going to have some one-pair ace-x hands to go ahead and call this down, especially for that half-pot size. There's no reason to call with the 10s, though. I don't have great MDA for the 3-bet spots right here. But just given the texture and my analysis of the range composition of both his range and mine, what I want to be calling down here is with hands like, ace-x, ace-5, ace-4 that check back the turn. I guess I could maybe even float it with some of my ace-queen or ace-king that called pre-flop. There's no reason I need to defend with 10s here against this guy, especially when I think his range is probably stronger with that larger pre-flop size or larger flop size and the small pre-flop size. Kind of a weird spot, but I think it's okay to go ahead and fold 10, so I don't think it's that close. Going to range check in this blind on blind spot on the upper right-hand table. And we're going to fold jack high, no real backdoors to speak of against the half pot stab. Blind down blind, 7-4 is probably just outside of standard open, but I'm going to go ahead and expand my range ever so slightly because the pool does not 3-bet enough, and this guy hasn't shown himself, really hasn't shown anything through 1 orbit, so we can't draw any conclusions as of yet. But just knowing that the pool is probably, if not too tight, at least too passive in those spots, it's okay to expand your range, and 7-4 is probably just outside of standard, truly solver-approved type open in my mind. Button faces a cutoff 2.5x. We're going to use a standard 3-bet range of about 13%, which includes ace-jack offsuit. Upper right-hand table, we get a button open. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet pretty aggressively. Once again, our standard small blind versus button range of about 15%. Ace-6 suited is not a part of that, however, and I've got no reason to expand my range to include a hand that weak, so we're going to go ahead and fold. The upper right-hand table, we are, however, going to 3-bet the big blind for about a 15% range against the big blind 3x open. That, of course, is going to include all my suited broadways like king-queen suited. Probably going to 3-bet a range like pocket sixes or better, suited broadways, some suited connectors and gappers down to maybe like 7-6, 8-6, a few hands like jack-8, 10-7 suited. A few suited wheel aces like ace-5, ace-4, and maybe like ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen offsuit. Can open queen-deuce suited blind on blind, the lower left-hand table. We can open queen-7 suited in the upper right-hand table on the button. Those are both standard opens. With my flush draw and my small pair, I can deny equity from overcards. I'm okay with spades hitting on the river, of course. Just want to go ahead and probe small here. You know, if you wanted to check that because it's got some showdown value, I wouldn't hate that either. But I just like using that small bet on the turn in these out of position spots when players have shown so little concern for the pot on the flop. Upper left-hand table, queen 5-3, rainbow. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. We're going to not defend the queen 7 suited against the 4.5x big blind 3-bet. Blind on blind, lower right-hand table, ace-queen offsuit is a standard open. 3x open from the button. We're going to go ahead and defend this pretty tightly. Ace-8's probably about the bottom of my ace-x defense range here for that size, but we are going to go ahead and defend it. Lower right-hand table, range check, 6-deuce-deuce rainbow. Upper right-hand table, check call with our top pair middle kicker at least once. Check call with our ace high, which you have no reason to think we're beat on the lower right-hand table, and we turn what's probably the best card in the deck for us, a queen. Upper right-hand table, there's really no reason to bet into a 5 or a better ace. He's going to have all kinds of weird high card hands that need to bluff us off, so I think we just want to check and induce with our trip aces on that scary board. Lower right-hand table, after the turn checks through, we just want to go ahead and bet our queen, bet for value. He bets about half pot in this blind on blind spot. Can't imagine I'm calling. I'm just going to look at some MDA stats real briefly to see what regs do when blind on blind is the preflop caller. The half pot bet is heavily overbluffed, even with the 4 straight turn, which trends under bluff, not enough to outdo the sizing. Plus, our hand is strong. We even beat a few aces that could try to get some value here, so we're going to go ahead and call that. Yeah, and he's just going to have so many of those high card kind of hands that have to bluff that we can trap. We can't get value from if we bet. So I think check calling the river there. Checking to induce a bluff and calling unless something about the sizing gets really super large and tells me I can fold a much larger percentage of my range and that their composition's a lot less bluffy. Other than something like that, I think check call is going to be a very appropriate standard line for that spot. Face a 4.5's 3-bets from the small blind against our button open. That's probably the most aggressive spot in poker. Solver should do that with about a 15% range. Regs do it with about a 14% from what I've seen MDA-wise. They don't miss too many of their 3-bets. We don't have enough data so far on this pool to know that this guy is any different from anyone else in the pool. This is going to be a defense as a standard move against the pool here, so we're going to go ahead and call. Blind on blind, lower left-hand, or blind versus a limper, rather, lower left-hand table. We're going to go ahead and just check in with queen 5, then check on the ace-queen deuce board. Going to check again. So we've got that's a good 5 to check back. You know, we want to bet some of our 5s, check others. With the queen, it's got a lot of showdown value. I think I just want to check and try to induce a bluff here. I don't want to try to get called by worse. Against a small bet, we're going to call with top pair in the 3-bet pot on that lower left-hand table, or lower right-hand table, rather. He checks. We've got a middling top pair and a gut shot. I think some 8s want to be betting this turn. You know, we've probably got some weird 8x hands with backdoor flush draws. The 8s that have no showdown value are the ones that want to be betting. That we've got the jack, and it's a weak jack. I don't want to get check raised off this where I'm probably in bad shape against hands that crush me or draws with tons of equity. I want to go ahead and check this back. I hope I'm going to dodge the river overcards, but I can induce bluffs on lots of rivers. This is a river that should probably be pretty bluffy just because it's going to scare me off my 1 pair hands. I'm going to be calling most bets here. If he goes ahead and jams, that gives me a whole different story. Now that small bet is so funky. I wonder if that's some kind of weird block. I think I actually want to raise this up and try to get some value. I would usually use a pot size bet on these 4 straight textures. However, because I'm actually trying to get called by worse, I'm going to exploitively go ahead and bet a bit smaller and just hope he calls me with something goofy, you know, a weaker pair that just can't give me credit. So I'm going to use more like a 60%. Oh, and he had the 5, so I'm surprised he didn't try to bet larger or raise back at me when I raised. But I think I want to go ahead and try to get some value there with the second pair. Honestly, I would like it if he goes ahead and continues barreling that turn with the 5. I guess his plan is to probably try to check raise me all in with flush draw, open-ended straight draw on the ace-high overcard, which would also be reasonable. When the river hits, I think he should bet larger and try to get more value. But when he bets that real small 3.5 into like 30-some blinds, I think the move is just to go ahead and raise small to try to get value with top 2. You know, reading him for some kind of goofy blocking type hand. You know, a one-pair hand that can call and think I'm full of crap when I raise. Blind on blind, we'll open the ace-8 offsuit in the upper right-hand table. That's a standard open. We're going to check range on 10-7-4. Got a little bit in the way of backdoor draws. That's a pretty decent size. Our backdoors aren't great. Our ace-high isn't great. He's been aggressive, so we might face a lot more turn barrels too. I guess in theory I can check raise if I pick up equity on a card like a 5 or a 9, or just call down if I hit the ace. Because of that, and there's a decent number of cards I can continue with, and I think I've got a plan, I'm going to go ahead and call. If you wanted to fold for this sizing with relatively weak backdoors, I don't hate that either. I'm going to go ahead and continue checking. And now when he checks back, I want to try to get value out of my ace, you know, rep some kind of whiff bluff like 8-7, 5-6, all of which are still complete air. Try to get heroed by a 10 or a 7. It gives me balance for when I do that with my bluffs. Okay, we got a blind on blind spot. We open pocket jacks. Player has been relatively reserved pre-flop so far. This is his first pre-flop 3-bet. That said, jacks in a blind on blind spot is awfully strong. I'm obviously not folding. I'm just trying to decide if there's any merit in calling as opposed to a 4-bet, which would be a bit more standard. You know, in a blind on blind spot, against the pool or against the solver, we should be stacking off with 9s or 10s or better. Against the pool, probably at least 10s. Even if I want to slant myself slightly tighter, I'm still going to stack off jacks. Maybe I put 10s in my cold call range because I think this guy might be a little bit on the tighter side. But jacks, I think I still want to 4-bet and call off here. Yeah, against the pool, I'm probably doing something like this, 10s plus ace-king with ace-queen offsuit and some suited wheel aces as my bluffs. If I'm getting tighter because I think this guy's on the tight side, maybe I'll take out 10s and ace-4, one stack-off hand and one bluff hand to keep myself relatively balanced pre-flop, but to adjust for his perceived tighter tendencies. Cutoff open. We're on the big blind. Jack-10 suited is a pretty standard 3-bet. This is his first hand he's raised. We've only played 10 hands. It's probably a bit premature to start saying this guy's a nitty reg or anything other than a standard reg in the pool. 2.5x open, 100 blinds. That tells me he's a reg, especially without some wacky pre-flop stats so far that tells me to the contrary. But I'm not going to make any conclusions that this guy's a nitty reg or an aggressive reg or anything like that. I'm going to call him a standard run-of-the-mill garden variety reg that we see in the pool. And so I'm going to use a standard 3-bet size, given that's my assessment of the situation, and Jack-10 clubs is going to be in there. I've got roughly a 13% 3-bet range here, cutoff versus button. Now when we face the 4-bet, this gets a bit interesting. Although I guess even against a solver that's appropriately aggressive, I should probably still be folding Jack-10 here against a 4-bet out of position. The pool is going to 4-bet probably slightly too tight. So I'm going to, if anything, be tighter, not looser. I can go ahead and fold the ace-jack to the 4-bet. Lower left-hand table, big blind or button opens for 3x. We're on the big blind with our 10s. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet. This guy hasn't played a hand in 14 hands so far. I'm going to go ahead and assume he's probably a little bit tighter, having not played a single hand thus far. So I'm going to treat this more like a cutoff open and 3-bet him probably more like a 10% range as opposed to something more like a 15% range. But either way, pocket 10s is going to be in there. It doesn't change my action in that exact situation with that exact hand. It just changes how I assess the situation as a whole and what range of hands I'm going to be playing him with. A 2.5x open from the cutoff. And then we've got a caller from the button. The player from the cutoff has been on the loose aggressive side, and while I get a bit tighter when there's an overcall, some of these hands that are on the cusp in these big blind 3-bet spots like ace-queen, ace-jack, those actually are a bit more incentivized to 3-bet when it's a squeeze scenario. Given that this guy's a bit more aggressive, I'm going to just treat it more like a button open and throw ace-jack there into that 3-bet range. I'm going to 3-bet him a bit more aggressively than I typically would because I think he's loose. And I don't want to play ace-jack offsuit multi-way 3-handed. I want to squeeze them up pre-flop and pick up that extra money. That's another spot where it's a little bit different than you might do as a standard play, but then again, it's hard to have a standard play for a cutoff open with a button cold call when you're in the big blind because it's a bit more unusual spot because players shouldn't be cold calling that very often. Over here, middle position, we face a big blind 3-bet to about 4.5x. We could just go ahead and fold the jack-9 in this formation. There's no reason to think the big blind is getting that aggressive when we're in middle position, even though he has been active so far. It's only been a couple of opportunities. I don't want to jump to any wild conclusions. And Jack-9 is pretty far outside of a defense range from middle position against a more standard type player. I'm looking at my ranges off screen real quick. Against a big blind 4.5x 3-bet, a solver world, that should be about an 8% 3-bet. And even against a solver, against a 4.5x 3-bet, an 8% range, we're not going to defend Jack-9. The pool is probably a good bit tighter, especially in those earlier formations. Even if we think this player is not tight like the pool because he's been aggressive over the first 2 orbits, I still don't like to go any wider than what a GTO solver type defense unless I've got a great reason to do so. I sure don't have that. Even if I'm using a GTO level of aggressions and frequencies, for how I'd construct my 3-bet defense range, even if I'm making that assumption, Jack-9 is still a bit too loose to call. So I think we can go ahead and safely fold that, even though I do have some suspicion that this player is a bit more aggressive than the typical player should be. I just don't have enough information on this guy yet to say that he's so loose and so aggressive compared to what the pool is doing, that he's actually looser than a solver, and I should be defending him wider than a solver defense range for those given formations. I hope that makes sense, but that's why I opted to do what I did right there, even with some indications that player is on the aggressive side. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open Queen-Jack suited from the cutoff. In the lower left-hand table, we're going to probably get in here with Queen-Jack one way or another, or I'm sorry, with King-Jack, either as a raise first in or as a 3-bet. Even against an under-the-gun open, I'm going to use King-Queen offsuit as a 3-bet for the most part, so I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet him from the cutoff. Upper right-hand table, Jack-8-10, I'm going to go ahead and bet small with my top pair and my gut shot. See if we can't define his hand some, keep my range together. Now we have a double gut shot and second pair. That's a fine hand to check back. This particular card, I can have all the king-queen, though he can probably have a lot of it as well. He should 3-bet some of it pre-flop or on the flop, but I actually have all of it, so I've got a bit more of it than there. I've got all the aces, 10s, jacks, 8s. He should 3-bet that to some extent pre-flop as well, or on the flop. Either pre-flop or the flop, those hands are often 3-bet. So he doesn't have all the sets where I have all of them. He doesn't have all the straights. I have all of them. I've got all the queen-9 suited. He really shouldn't have much queen-9 offsuit. So I think I've got a nut advantage. I think I can be using overbets on this spot. Second pair, double gut shot. That's a fine hand to check back. I'm trying to think what queen X I have that can, in fact, from middle position, can in fact be bluffing. Queen 9's the nuts, king queen's the nuts, queen 9's the second nuts. I guess queen 10 would actually be my queen X bluff right here. I want to check back this particular queen. my queen jacks for the most part. Now having hit the straight, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bet for pot, with that 4 straight out there, try to get some value from ace X, 2 pair, anything, pretty much all kinds of hands that coordinate with that board. And I like using that pot size bet on the 4 straight or 4 flush runouts. I really only lose to king queen or backdoored clubs, so I'm not too worried about being beat here, although a check raise really puts me in a weird spot at the same time. I think it's actually appropriate to fold to the check raise, just because him finding a check raise bluff on that texture is going to be so tricky. It's also about a pot size check raise, slightly more than pot, so it's a big one. Given that check raises are under bluff, this formation is not one that is very conducive to bluffs, and given that it's hard for him to find bluffs on that texture, because what does he call the flop with other than backdoor clubs that also got there? So I think that's a fold. I timed out talking about it, but I was content to fold all along. Cut off on the lower right-hand table, ace-7 suited's an open. Trying to find bluffs on that turn is tricky. I guess my suited kings that picked up backdoor flushes, or most of my suited kings as gut shots, are going to be my primary bluffs anyway. I was looking for queen X to bluff, and I don't really have much. I mean, my queens are either a pair, ace queen, queen jack, queen 10, or they're the straights with queen queen, queen 9. Go ahead and 3-bet from the small blind against that button up. I'm going to open ace 6. And then on the upper right-hand table, we can 3-bet the 7-8 suited connector in the blind-on-blind spot. I guess I could maybe use queen 10 as a bluff because the 10 doesn't have a ton of showdown value. But the other queen should be checks for sure, and I think my king X, especially with the club draw, is going to be the kind of hands I want to be using as my bluffs. Queen Jack, I think you should definitely check back with some inherent showdown value and lots of good draw. Lower left-hand table, we open pocket 10s from the cutoff. Upper left-hand table, we just turn the double gut shot, so I think we're going to want to keep barreling this for sure. And we'll probably barrel off on the river as we can have ace-king. He really can't. We can have aces. He really can't. We can have king-queen more than he will. At least you still have a lot of that. We're going to use a 2/3 size to upper river jam. 2/3 gets us to just about 70 in the pot. It'll be a slight overbet jam on the river. We're going to do that probably no matter what peels off, whether we hit our straight or not. Oh, and he check raised us out of our seat. We are faced with a lot of aggression today. Things are not going so well, but I'm pretty much okay with that decision. I don't want to be checking back 8 high. I would also be betting hands like king, queen, and some various club draws on the turn. But we can go ahead and fold now with 8 high for the check raise all in. Upper right-hand table, we open jacks from the cutoff. Get called in position and out of position. And check range with an in-position player to us in the single raise pot, though not automatically assuming our jacks are beat. Now, if it checks to me, I'm going to start stabbing a ton of my range, and even though second pair is kind of firmly in the range of hands that loves to check on the turn, I think this is a fine spot to bet even a second pair kind of hand. I can be called by 10x, I can be called by club draws, I can deny equity from, pocket pairs that can hit the set, weird random Broadway draws. I'm not that worried about being beat by a king with the button having checked the flop and the small blind having checked twice. Lower left-hand table, button open, small blind's going to 3-bet about 15%, including all suited aces. Now, the question is whether I try to induce with the jacks or whether I try to value bet against the 10. Let's see. This guy seems to be a reg type player, and regs are really not that bluffy in this in position call spot. Also when they check the flop, call the turn, and bet the river. I think I'm better off trying to value bet thin to get heroed by a 10 or some middling pair rather than try to induce a bluff from whiff clubs. I think that's the better play. He will have some whiff clubs, but I don't know if he has enough of them to justify it, especially given general pool tendencies towards passivity and underbluffing in that particular line. Lower left-hand table will range bet on the ace-king-deuce two-tone board. We'll be checking most turns except for ones that involve an 8. 3 of clubs, we would not be using an overbet size because he can have so many suited cards just like we can, so I'd be betting my flushes. Most of my sets, probably all of my sets, I think I'd be betting ace-king, ace-3. I may check back a couple of two-pair combos just so I've got those in my river check-back range. My naked queen of clubs, my Broadway gut shot hands with a club would certainly be bet. I might bet some real small club type hands, and I think I'd check back the middling clubs so I've got some middling bluff catchers. And I think I'll take my showdown with my 8s here. I'm not going to try to bluff him off trip aces or a flush. Not even going to try to bluff him off of a king. I guess the only thing I'm trying to bluff him off is he got some random pocket pairs that didn't 3-bet preflop higher than the 8s. I don't think that's a great part of the range to target. I'm not good a ton here, but I think I've got better hands to bluff in this smidge of showdown value, so we're going to check the 8s back. Yeah, I don't really know that I fold out the king there. I'd rather be bluffing with no showdown die to try to fold out the king. Upper left-hand table, got a middle position open. Probably going to go ahead and fold this. I think that's too loose to 3-bet with against the middle position from the small blind. A bit outside the range, pretty close, but a little bit too loose. I had this guy tagged as a potential fish based on what he was doing earlier, but his pre-flop stats don't seem to back that up. And in fact, this table seems pretty reggy and nitty, so I'm just going to go ahead and shuffle that one out. Lower left-hand table doesn't seem very fishy or loose. We'll shuffle that one out. We'll keep the other ones for now, as even though there's no obvious fish anywhere, these guys at least seem to have some looser tendencies, which we can take advantage of. And I don't want to shuffle all 4 tables out and be left with nothing, so I'll only shuffle out 2 at a time here. Middle position open, we're going to play 3-bet or fold from the cutoff, and ace-8 suited is probably a little bit too loose to 3-bet with, so we'll go ahead and fold that. Probably use a range like 9s or better, suited broadways, a couple suited wheel aces, and then ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen. About 10% of hands. If I was going to add more suited aces, I would use the suited wheel aces first, the rest of them ace-3 and ace-deuce before ace-9 through ace-6, just because there's more playability post-flop. I can hit small gut shots I can get aggressive with, whereas the ace-6 through ace-9 don't make any form of straight draws, or at least not anything involving 2 cards. So those are probably a bit weaker, and I would prioritize them behind ace-3, ace-2, ace-3, and ace-deuce for my 3-bet range. So I think ace-8's a pretty clear fold there, even if I am going to look for some reasons to expand my 3-bet range, which I don't have justification for in that particular scenario anyway, is the regular player that opened did not seem to be particularly loose or fishy or anything like that that would give me some reason to play wider. And that might be the same table I was just at, and it's all full stacks. I'm going to shuffle around and look for a different one. I'm looking for ideally at least a short stack or 2 to tell me there's some fish at the table, before we get any hands played, and then take a look at their pre-flop tendencies and stats. Look for limping, look for far too many cold calls and spots where you shouldn't have lots of them to tell me I'm playing against some weaker players. Right now the pool seems relatively competent. I don't see a whole ton of massive pre-flop mistakes like I often see in these games, so I think we might be a bit more reg-heavy at the moment. Which is fine. The 1-2 player regs, they're okay. They're not world beaters, but they're not terrible. I'd rather play with a table with a bunch of fish, but I also want to get hands in, so I've got to take the games as they come. Blind down blind, 7-4 offsuit's a bit too weak to defend with. This player seems to be playing like a very regular type style as well, 26-21 with aggressive pre-flop 3-bets through limited opportunity. No reason to think I should do anything non-standard against him as of yet. I keep getting that one table. I think that's the same stack sizes I keep trying to avoid, looking for something different. So we'll wait a minute before we pop up the new tables. Small blind, we're facing under the gun open. We want a 3-bet or fold. I think 9s are probably the worst pair I would 3-bet in this spot, but I do want to 3-bet it. Probably only about a 7% range or so there. You know, that denotes strength, 3-betting under the gun open from the small blind. It's a relatively tight range, and it should be. So you get a decent number of folds there, even though his range is tight to begin with, just because my range is going to be perceived as being strong. Okay, and this table's got filled in with 2 other players, buy-in and short, so I'm going to be pretty content to keep that one and see how it plays for a couple orbits. Button opens 2.5x. We're in the big blind with king-queen offsuit. That's a very standard defense with a call. No reason to fold, no reason to 3-bet. I think that's a clear call. And we'll check to him out of position. Okay, now we have king, jack, 9 with the 7 on the turn. That brings the backdoor flush draw. We've got a double gut shot with our 10 and top pair. I think I want to go ahead and start jabbing into him here. I'll use the smaller bet. Might be inclined to use the overbet with hands that are already nutted or hands that don't have showdown value but are draw, so they're nut type hands. For everything else, I like to use that smaller bet. That doesn't get defended very well. I'll probably value bet a blank river with my top pair for a standard 2/3 type size. Try to get hero called by some kind of jack 9x hand that check back the flop, playing a split range. Got a player that posts the cutoff and then checks. He gets isolated. We're going to go ahead and play back at this pretty aggressively. Given the stack sizes at play for the bet size I want to use, I'm going to treat this more like a cold 4-bet or fold type range, but I am going to have a lot of bluffs. I'm going to be stacking off with jacks or better against this guy and mixing a pretty healthy amount of bluffs. I'm probably going to be bluffing about a 60-40 ratio of hands. Ace-jack suited's a fine hand to use for that, especially if I can't have any cold calls, and there's no, because I don't want to have cold calls. You can do whatever you want, but I don't recommend having cold calls against a limp and an isolation from the small blind. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop that up. I'm probably 3-betting 7-8% right there. Hands like jacks plus ace king to stack off. Maybe all my suited broadways, ace queen, maybe pocket 10s, pocket 9s get in there too. Hands that play well post flop if I'm called, either that make big pairs, already are big pairs, or can at least flop draws with lots of equity. In this new table, we do have another shorty stack player, playing 30-some blinds deep, so that's a promising start. I'm going to shuffle this table out now as well, with it breaking and just being regs, and I've got another new table, a couple new tables filled in. Small blind opens, or button opens rather, we're in the small blind. Ace-10 suited, right on the cusp of hands I would 3-bet. If you want to 3-bet it, I don't mind. I'm just going to go ahead and fold that one instead, because I think it's pretty close. I don't want to get my frequencies too far to whack. But if you were to use that hand to 3-bet in that spot, I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's entirely justifiable. 10-7 suited, we can open from the cutoff. And we'll shuffle that table out. 5-3 is a fold from middle position. Blind on blind, 6-3 suited is probably a bit outside of my standard open, but this guy has not shown particularly aggressive pre-flop 3-betting tendencies, so I'm going to be able to realize a lot of equity by getting to the flop more often than I should. I'm going to go ahead and expand my range ever so slightly and include that small suited connector, or suited gapper. And I'm going to check my range on the flop on ace-3-7. And now when he checks back and the turn ace, I'm going to go ahead and start jabbing. This hand doesn't have a ton of showdown value just because so many overcards can pair up. I think I'd rather even treat this like a bluff and go ahead and try to bluff him off various hands that are better. In that case, that means I need to use an overbet size here to fold him off a 7 or an 8. I just don't want to run into a trapped ace, which is possible, but I can have plenty of them. So I'm going to use the overbet and fold him off pretty much any non-ace hand. And it is possible I had the best hand to begin with. He could have just floated me with some kind of random high cards or some kind of gut shot draw on the turn that I was good anyway. I don't want to get myself into a spot with a hand that week where I'm checking to induce bluffs from those, where I'm just going to be, running into so many better hands there than my very small pair. I'd just rather turn that into a bluff and claim the pot right now. We'll occasionally run into trip aces that check back the flop and flatted the turn. I don't think that's a very large percentage of his range as played, though, so I'm willing to take that risk. Okay, middle position opens. We're going to 3-bet or fold from the cutoff, and we're going to include pocket nines in that range, a roughly 10% 3-bet range. This is probably our lowest pair. Probably nines plus suited broadways, a few suited wheel aces, ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, king-queen. Something like that seems like an appropriate range here for this spot. We get cold called in position by a player who's now making me think he might be a bit fishy just to cold call a 3-bet in position. Given that we only have one player and we've got the initiative in the 3-bet pot, I am going to go ahead and range bet small. I can have all kinds of trip jack combos, aces full, ace king, ace king, ace queen. I can have pocket tens here as well. Pocket nines is essentially my very worst hand at this point now, so I'm going to check it. Every other hand in my range is either going to be a pair of aces, a full house, trips with the gut shot, or the straight. Okay, and now in this particular run out, I think I can just be jamming all in with my jacks that trap the turn, my aces full that trap the turn, my queens that got there. I just need to use this as an overbet bluff all in hand right here because it's my absolute worst hand. I can't have anything worse than this. And I'm not going to be dicking around with small value bets on that river. I've got so many full houses in quad type hands in my range. And the stuff that stuff that isn't that is going to be the king X kind of hand, or at least ace X. I guess my weak aces I can check and just try to show those down. Although there might even be some merit for turning those into bluffs because I've got so much value and so few bluffs. But I want to be betting the bulk of my full houses and quad type hands and pocket nines. I'm just looking for a bluff so bad on that particular board that I've got to use nines as the bluff right there. I don't have any unpaired high card hands on that texture. They're all out there. They've all coordinated with the board in some way. We get a fish that donks into us for just over pot on king 7-6 rainbow. We don't really have any equity. I don't want to call that slightly over pot bet all in with ace high. It's possible my hand is the best hand there some of the time, but I think it's okay to fold that. Upper right hand table, going to go ahead and bet small with my ace king, 2 overcards, and my gut shot. Probably don't get a ton of folds here on this texture. I think it's okay to do that. Let me take a look here. What do I want to continue betting? I want to continue betting jacks, all my sets, queens, jacks, nines, sevens. I've got all of those. I've got king 10. I've got ace 10 as a bluff. I think I want to keep using this hand as a bluff as well, especially with that club in it, where I can rep the flush on the third club. I'm going to bet a 2/3 size here to set me up for a pot size river jam. I'm going to range bet the lower left-hand table on jack deuce 5. And I think with removal to ace queen, ace jack, king queen, king 10, I've got no real choice but to go ahead and barrel off. Lower left-hand table, I'm going to check back with now I've got an open-ended straight draw and backdoor flush draw with the pair as well. Without the pair, I'm going to go ahead and be betting those, obviously. Now having hit trips, I think I want to use an overbet size here for value as well as for bluffs, just because the 5x in my range almost exclusively checks back on the turn, so that 5 is a pretty good card for me. I'm going to use a 2x pot bet here, try to get a sticky jack to hero me. I've also got good blockers to a straight that either ace-4 or 4-6 with my own 4, so I'm somewhat protected from running into real strong value hands that trap like that. So I like that play there. I'm pretty happy with that. We 3-bet, the 3-bet gets cold called, and then we get 4-bet from the player who we just tripled off against. He puts in a third of his stack. There's really nothing to do here except 4-bet all in with the hands that I like. Sometimes I trap aces against 4-bets, but against a 4-bet that large, where we don't really call many 4-bets, period, and with the player behind me, I'm not even going to trap aces. I'm just going to get my ace king, and queens plus in against this guy and probably fold everything else. And I think that's a fine way to play that scenario. Is you're going to pick up so much money from the all-in right there, and his 4-bet cost him so much, you can actually fold a ton of your 3-bet range in that spot. Plus, the player that cold called has some defense responsibility as well. If we're talking about a GTO equilibrium scenario, where I'm okay to fold more hands than I otherwise would against a 4-bet of that size, just because he's got to defend some of them too to keep this guy's 4-bet from being profitable. So I think it's okay to pretty much call nothing in that spot and just play queens plus ace king over the top all in against that player. Got a cutoff that open limps. We're going to isolate from the button with probably a 28-ish% range, something like our cutoff raise first in range. Pocket nines, of course, is part of that. He limp calls, and we get a 7-3 deuce board rainbow. That's a real nice board for our nines, giving us a small overpair. We're going to go ahead and range bet that board small. Force him to either fold or continue for a price with his random overcards and start building the pot small against his middling small pair hands that connected with that board in some way. Turn action with our hand is interesting. It's going to depend very heavily on the turn card. We're not going to have an overpair for the most part on the turn anymore, so we might actually check a lot of turns, but it's just going to depend. Going to depend on what the turn texture does and what we think about our range as a whole on that card. If it's an overbet scenario, the nines are almost certainly going to be a check back. If it's a merge scenario where we're betting smaller, we might find a way to bet the nines a lot more often. And I'm happy to bet the nines for 3 streets, even with some overcards peeling if I'm not using an overbet size. If I'm using a 2/3 type size against a guy who can call me down with 6-7 for 3 streets. Upper right-hand table, the button opens. We're going to 3-bet the small blind with pocket tens. Going to 3-betting very aggressively in this formation, probably like a 15% range. We've got We've got a button open, or we've got a button scenario against an under-the-gun limper. We're going to go ahead and isolate once again with like a 28% cutoff type opening range. Ace-9 is towards the bottom of that, but we can go ahead and use that, and we should be tagging these limpers as wrecks as well. We get cold 4-bet from the big blind, trying to decide what we want to do given that we are now going to be out of position with pocket 10s. This is a very tough decision, which probably also means it's probably pretty close no matter what we do if it's that tricky. Taking a look at what we would normally do against a cutoff. Against the cutoff 4-bet, we would go ahead and call this, but it's also a larger size, which makes you want to call less, makes you want to jam more. I don't know that this player is really. I mean, queens I'm getting in. I think jacks I'm still getting in. 10s because the cold 4-bets tend to be a bit too tight. I'm just going to go ahead and make a nitty fold. And we're going to fold against the in-position 3-bet with our ace-7 suited. Three-handed on the 6-5-5 board, we're just going to check back with our ace-9. We got that big blind caller and the limper limp called as well. He bets pretty healthy, about 75% on the turn, so we can just go ahead and fold with no real equity. Button opens upper left-hand table. We're going to 3-bet aggressively from the small blind, about 15%, probably all of our suited aces, including ace-4. And we can open the button upper left-hand table with 7-5 suited. This table does not seem to have much in the way of recreational weak players. I know that under-the-gun player has got a short stack, so we'll stick around for him. But other than that, there's not a lot going on. Lower right-hand table, we seem to have found a wreck. Another one. And we've got a short stack type player, which I'm pretty comfortable tagging as a wreck as well. And there's a limp, which also I love to see if I'm trying to decide if someone's a wreck. Upper left table, we'll go ahead and range bet small on the queen-queen 6 flop. Rainbow with that 5-6-7, we've got the pivot to the straight and a backdoor spade draw. So there's a decent number of cards for the particular hand that we hold. King of diamonds is not one of them, however. We're looking for a spade, an 8, a 4, a 9, a 3. On this particular board, I could be betting my 6s full. I could be betting my good trip queens. I would trap my quad queens. I think I would bet my kings full. I think I would bet my kings full. I'd be using an overbet. So the paired board, I go back and forth. There's not a ton of hands I want to bet. But I also want to bet a very polarized range for the most part. I'm not really sure if I want to overbet or use a more standard-sized range with a mergy scenario. I'm going to check back 7-5 either way, and I'll look to stab the river if he gives me some indication that he's weak on the river. I would certainly be value betting my king X. I'd probably be value betting some 8X that I checked back and hit on the river. But 7 high, I've got no choice but to bluff. Lower right-hand table, I open the button with ace-10. The big blind, who seems to be a short stack wreck, calls me on ace-7-5 rainbow. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small. And he min raises me. We're going nowhere with top pair, decent kicker. And then he called the upper left table. He called me with the 6, which is not unreasonable, but also shows that value betting the 8 is probably a pretty reasonable play. We're going to open 9-7 suited from the cutoff. This guy's been aggressive so far. He's got a lot of hands in his range. And we've got such a good hand right here. I'm trying to take a look at what I want to do on the river. I'm pretty sure the only decision here is just going to be to call and then to call off. But, I mean, a check raise bet line is a bit under bluff from a fish, but it's about neutral when you account for the sizing he's going to have to use. And then he instantly goes all in. It's pretty marginal, but I think this slants slightly towards a call, and we're going to call off here. Yeah, and we actually had him out kicked until the river, so very reasonable hand to call down there, even though it's not a slam dunk that we're good. I mean, on the flop, we're almost always good, but he could have hit some goofball 5 that he min-raised the flop with as well. That was my bigger concern, but we just don't want to be trying to make hero folds to fishy players that could be clicking buttons. He's been 91% aggressive, 10 of 11 opportunities he's taken the aggressive action as opposed to the more passive action, which is obviously a lot wider than you can do in any sort of balanced fashion. There's a reasonable chance that guy's got weird random gut shots or just clicking buttons with random 2 cards kind of thing. So I think you just have to go ahead and call down there with your pair of aces, even though the turn and the river counterfeit our kicker down, so we just shop with any ace. The fact that he did that with a worse ace also goes to show that we even dominate some value. Probably really, I'm talking about it more than I even should. I think it's just going to be the kind of hand you need to call down with. And if he occasionally beats you, so be it. Cutoff opens 2.5x. I'm going to defend for a call, but not 3-bet my king-queen. I think 3-betting's a little bit too loose in that spot. I can go ahead and call this hand. It plays okay for a call. Against that small bet, I'm going to be check-raising quite a bit. However, I don't really want to check-raise this is some weak backdoor equity in overcards. I think I'd rather the pot be smaller if this runs out 4 clubs, or if I hit an overcard for a pair. Plus, I can also try to bluff him off hands if I just blank out and only have king high. So I think that's an okay hand to call. I think I'd rather be check-raising with gut shots, some small flush draws, things like that. Even some backdoor flush draw type hands. I think king queen with a club is a reasonable hand to check call and have some overcards in my check call range. I haven't hit the 5. I would be check raising my 5s now. Could probably find a way to find a few bluffs. I'm not sure what I would choose as my bluffs. Maybe a hand like ace-4 with the ace of clubs would be a fine hand to check call the flop. I guess I probably don't really have that pre-flop. Trying to think what I could check call the flop with and check raise the turn as a bluff. But a lot of my 5x would now be check raised for value. King queen, I'm just going to go ahead and fold to that second barrel though. Blind on blind, 9-8 suited is a very standard hand to open. Nine-eight suited is also a standard button open on the upper right-hand table. And this upper left table, even though there is one shorter stack player, he's not playing particularly loose pre-flop. He doesn't have that much money. It's not that great a table otherwise. I'm going to go ahead and shuffle it out now. And we'll open again the upper right-hand table, this time from the cutoff with Queen 7 suited. Once again, that's a standard open. That's not any kind of range expansion or deviation. That's a standard play. Towards the bottom of our cutoff open range, but still a standard open. Upper left-hand table, Queen 9 suited is a standard open from middle position. Upper left-hand table, we get caller, and then the button squeezes. We're going to be folding so much of our open range here, and we're going to be mostly 4-betting or calling to continue. 4-bet to stack off with queens plus ace-king. Maybe use ace-queen offsuit as the bluff. Not too many cold calls. You can talk me into calling hands like jacks, 10s, ace-queen suited, I suppose, but really a very narrow and specifically tailored cold calling range, especially with that larger size and that player in between. If you wanted to tell me you have a no cold call range and just 4-bet a bit more, I could probably even talk me into that as well. But either way, Queen 9 is a fold. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, Jack 6 suited is a standard open. This player has been on the reserve, tight, passive side so far through the first 20 hands, so I'd be expanding my range, but no need to expand my range to bring in Jack 6. That's a standard open anyway. We get called. We're going to check range on Queen 8-3. We've got no real equity, but he showed no initiative on that flop either. We're going to go ahead and stab at it and perhaps even bluff the river. We have good removal because now we block 4-6 and we don't block the club. So I'm going to use this as an overbet bluff hand here. Should make the 8s fold for sure and even put kings in quite the bad spot. A 4, I guess, would be a bit better for removal purposes because it also blocks ace-4, but I think what we're doing there is pretty reasonable. We're facing a 3x open from the button. That's a pretty standard 3-bet from the button. However, this player has been kind of fishy, kind of passive, so I'm not going to 3-bet him as aggressively. I'm actually going to treat this more like a cutoff raise first in. That said, I can still 3-bet a couple of suited wheel aces, and ace-4 is going to be one of them. So even with a tighter range, I'm still going to include ace-4. 3-betting him probably about 10% as opposed to about 15% in this scenario. Queen, queen, 6, two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet him small. We block some ace-queen, which is nice, but it's more a case of he just doesn't really hit that board with much of anything. A lot of his pre-flop calling range is just on-paired high cards, a lot of which doesn't even have any kind of backdoor equity. Turn with the third heart. We're going to slow way down, go ahead and check. I could be checking. I guess I wouldn't really have any full houses. And now on that fourth heart, I've got to turn this hand into a bluff, even though I have a pair. I'm going to be using a pot-size bet. You know, and I could still have my pocket queens in that hand, or I'm going to have some queen of hearts that didn't bet the turn, or I'm sorry, some ace of hearts that didn't bet the turn for the nut non-boat. Mostly ace-queen with the queen of hearts. I think I would be checking the turn just because it's not really scared of any rivers. And it's hard for me to find hands that can legitimately check but also continue. Lower right-hand table will open ace-7 on the button. We get called, so we're going to go ahead and range bet after the big blind checks on the 4-3-3 monotone. King 10 on the upper left-hand table is on the cusp of an open. I've got a rec in the big blind, so I'm actually going to go ahead and sneak in a bit wider than I otherwise would. You could also fold that. I think it's probably a mixed open in solver world. It's probably pretty close to 0 EV in a vacuum. And we get a hand in here with the rec, so what I was hoping to have happen so far has played out. We've got an ace-jack-5 two-tone board. If he checks, we're going to range bet. We get instantly called. Now we can have aces, jacks, 5s, 4s. I would probably open even those small pairs under the gun. I can have ace-jack. I can have ace-5 and ace-4 suited. And I can have ace-king, ace-queen. This could be an overbet spot for me here. I'm not going to bet overbet all my gut shots, but I am going to overbet some gut shots with a spade blocker. I think I can go ahead and bet the king 10. He has less flushes that can continue. Less flush draws that can continue. And now the river has gotten here. I don't see much merit in giving up. He's going to calm me down with a lot of ace-type hands. Oh, he donks into me, so it's going to be an easy decision for me to go ahead and fold. I'm going to briefly look at, how weak these fish leads are for, that's about a half pot bet, not quite a half pot bet. When they check call bet. Check call bet is a little bit, that's a little bit less bluffy as a whole, but that sizing is just so bluffy. There's some merit to getting wild and just raising all in here. That said, I don't know enough how fish respond to raises, so I'm not going to go ahead and do this. But if I'm either going to raise all in or I'm going to call or I'm going to fold with any hands I continue. I'm not going to use a different raise size. I'm going to raise all in with my sets, ace-jack type hands or two-pair type hands. Ace-king is close, ace-queen is close, but I'm going to go ahead and fold and not bluff raise this guy without a better sense of what's going on. I was planning to bluff the river for, a 2/3 type size, just not showdown my king high, try to fold him off a jack. If you want to tell me an overbet is a better bluff size there and just moving all in, I would definitely listen to some reason on that. From my experience, though, the fish don't seem to be as elastic to bet sizing as they're supposed to be, so you seem to get a bit more bang for your buck with the smaller sizes than the overbet sizes. But I guess there's room for debate and dispute on that as well. Got another apparent recreational player, limps under the gun. We're going to go ahead and isolate up out of the blinds with queen jack of spades. It's going to be a pretty tight range, probably 8s or 9s is the worst pair. Suited broadways, maybe suited 9x, and then hands like ace-10 or better, king-queen, king-jack. Multi-way, I'm not going to go ahead and range, but I'm just going to go ahead and range check with two players calling me in position. Had I just had the fish call, I would have went ahead and range bet that board. But I'm going to go ahead and check everything when I've got two of those guys in there. And when he bets pot, and all I've got is a couple of marginal backdoors and a pot that's quickly bloating and growing, I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the way. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and raise up Jack-8 suited from the cutoff. Against the cutoff open, small blind 3-bet, we're going to be playing our big blind cold 4-bet or fold, and aces is a bit too weak, or aces would not be too weak. Pocket 8s is too weak to have in that cold 4-bet range, even as the bluff, so we're going to go ahead and fold that. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open 10-9 offsuit. Recreational type player calls. We've got an 8-7-5 rainbow board. He donks into us for pot. Just going to go ahead and flat call with our open ender. I'm probably calling my entire continue range, my overpairs, my sets, my 6-9. I guess I've got a bit of 6-4. 9 is an interesting card as we now have top pair and the open-ended straight draw. Some 10x is going to want to bet here. I'm really only going to be betting for value against the fish with a 6x type hand with some kind of straight. I guess I've got 6-10 as well, or Jack-10, so those can also bet. Some 10x is going to be bluffs. 10x is going to be my prime bluff along with backdoor heart draws. However, my 10x with top pair for some showdown value is going to be a fine one to check back. And now we made top 2 for more showdown value on the 4 straight board. Now he bets into me for pot. This is a very odd line from a clearly recreational player. Pot size bets are not that bluffy, roughly balanced from the fish. However, the bet check bet line is very, very over bluffed, whereas the 4 straight turn is very under bluffed. All about to the same nature. The large flop bet does trend under bluffed, so there's some reason to actually go ahead and hero fold this. However, we've got top 2. There's a chance he's doing this with something worse, without a 6 or without a jack. I would fold if it was a more marginal hand, but given we're so high up in our range and given that there is some uncertainty for how this guy is actually playing, I'm going to go ahead and call the pot size bet down. Yeah, and he's doing that with a random 8. 2.5x from the button. We're in the big blind. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet our 10-8 suited. That's towards the bottom of our 3-bet range, but a reasonable hand to 3-bet with all the same. Let me see here. We've got 4 to the straight now on this lower left-hand table, so we're going to go ahead and continue bluffing with our no real showdown value. Use a pot-size bet on the 4 straight run-out. He had a 9, so he called me down, which is going to happen some of the time, but I don't want to be showing down my ace high there. It's got no showdown value. I don't want to be betting small and give him a chance to call easily with his 1-pair type hands for a small bet, give him great price. You know, my value bets are for the most part going to be just, you know, straights or better type hands, so I don't want to be using a real small size. Upper left-hand table, middle position, we're going to open King 7 suited. Blind down blind, this player's been passive, so we can expand and open with the 10-3 suited on this lower left-hand table. Table doesn't seem to be that fishy, seems to be breaking, so we're going to go ahead and close it out after our next big blind, but we'll open A6 offsuit on the button before we go. I like the lower left table, so we at least have one recreational player in there in a nit across from us. We'll open 9s from the cutoff on that table. Got recreational players, at least one on the other 2 tables as well. So the tables are starting to look a little bit better than they've looked for the most part this session, which makes me happy. And we'll see what we get here for a new table. That looks pretty reggy so far with all full stacks. We'll swap that one out and see if there's a softer seat available. Interesting spot here is we get 3-bet pretty large by the tight big blind after the button cold calls us. Ignoring the fact that it's a squeeze scenario against the big blind, I'm probably just going to be stacking off with queens plus ace. Yeah, queens plus ace-king. Maybe some of your queens and ace-king offsuit gets trapped. Given that it's a squeeze, I'm going to put my queens and ace-king all into a 4-bet range. Don't want to call with that player behind me. I'm going to call really tightly. I don't think I want to be calling 9s even for that size with the player behind me still to act. I timed out and don't get to make the decision now myself, unfortunately. But it's probably pretty marginal against a player who's been on the tight side with the player behind me as well. If you say 9s are too good to fold, it's hard for me to argue that at the same time, but I think it's probably pretty close. It's probably closer than you think. In this scenario here, the big blind with a limp, a pretty decent size ISO, a button cold call. I'm going to treat this like a cold 4-bet or fold, and 10-9 is not going to be in that range even as a bluff, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold that. Against the smaller size, I might try to sneak in there and see a flop, but I'm going to be out of position against 2, if not 3 other players, which isn't a great position to be in, so I'm going to be content to have very few pre-flop calls in that spot as well. Upper left-hand table, the recreational player limps. We're going to isolate probably about a 28% range, mid to upper 20s, something like our cutoff open range here. Queen 10 offsuit's a fine hand to include in that range. Want to be isolating the limpers a bit tighter than we're just going to raise first in because, you know, the hand has a bit less equity when the guy has shown some desire to be in the pot. The limper's obviously not very strong, either skill-wise or range-wise, but you still want to be a bit tighter than you would as if he just folded and you were getting the chance to open the pot yourself. Suspected wreck over here playing on the short stack. We're going to go ahead and tag him. Lower right-hand table, under the gun player opens. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet him. It's about an 8% range, 8.5% range. Pocket queens is a part of that. We're not calling anything. We're just 3-betting or folding. 3-betting something like 9s plus, ace-king, ace-queen, king-queen, suited ace-queen through 10, suited king-queen through 10, suited queen-jack, maybe ace-5, ace-4 suited, something like that. Lower left-hand table, we get a 3x open from a middle position player. We're in the big blind with pocket deuces. We can go ahead and defend that and then check range to him out of position. He bets half pot. We're going to check raise, not too terribly aggressively. We don't really have much of anything here for value here except for pocket twos to check raise. We don't have queens or jacks. We really don't even have queen jack, because queen jack suited is going to 3-bet pre-flop, and I'm mostly folding the offsuit version. I am going to go ahead and 3-bet the deuces, even though my range is so narrowly defined, and he does have a bit more nut-type hands than I do. Bottom set just plays so well for the check raise because you don't block any of the good continue hands, either the draws or the top pairs or overpair type hands. I just want a chance to start getting money in. That board's awfully wet. Lots of draws I could have, be perceived as having. Lots of draws he could have to continue with. I don't want to let outdraw me for free. I want to start making that pot bigger when my hand is so strong and so stealthy. This is an interesting spot down here in that I don't really want to have a flat range for a 3x open against a stack that's so short. And because it's so short, I don't really give him a chance to 4-bet me small. So I want to treat my 3-bet almost like it's a 4-bet or fold. I don't really want to raise and get 8s in for 40 blinds against a guy that hasn't raised a hand so far in 30 hands. I'm content to fold that. Lower left-hand table, I'm going to check range, blind on blind after opening the ace-9 off. Lower right-hand table, I'm going to isolate the limper with ace-king. Against the pot size bet without any club in my hand, I'm actually just going to go ahead and fold that. Against a smaller bet, I was going to either call or raise, but that just signifies so much more strength to me as played. I'm not going to get myself into a spot where I'm check calling with a weak ace high and gut shot with no real, flush backdoor outs when he's showing strength from that large bet. And my hand's going to be very obvious if it comes in. Going to raise the limper out of the blind in the upper left-hand table. Going to range bet small on ace-4-4 after raising the limper on the lower right-hand table. Upper right-hand table, we open ace-king suited from middle position. We get called. This is a recreational player. I'm just looking to go bet and get this in against a weaker ace. Let me see here. I think I want to use. I just want to go probably about 15. That would be 30. I would make it a 48 pot. I'm going to go about pot. I'm going to bet pot on the turn. I'm going to go ahead and check range out of position, upper right-hand table. And now I'm just going to go ahead and shove to try to get paid off by any ace. No backdoors. It's close with the ace-king on the upper right-hand table. I'm going to go ahead and check fold. If I had a diamond in my hand or backdoor spades, it's an easy call. It's close ace-king high on that board against an in-position better. And Snap calls me off, and he's got a worse ace, most likely. We're going to check range in the lower left-hand table, Jack 8-5 after opening middle position. The ace is an interesting card, as we now have, a marginal top pair. He had ace-deuce on the lower right-hand table, so we were right to just keep blasting and get him in there, so he could have tons of aces in his range as played. And if he has a 4, so be it. I think I want to bet small and then bet small to try to get called by, 8-9, Jack-10, stuff like that. You can get a little bit of value from 10-9 flush draw hands. Flush hits on the river, which makes my hand less relatively strong as I'm now behind the flush draws that got there. I don't think there's a ton of merit in this line that's not very bluffy from who's probably a reg-type player. They're just not very bluffy. They're pretty passive in this line when they call in position. They don't call as much pre-flops. They don't have as many potential bluffs in their hand. I'm going to value cut myself a decent bit against a flush that raises me or against even a better ace-type hand, but I think I'd much rather try to value bet and get called by Jack X that just doesn't believe me for the second barrel than it is to check and hope to bluff catch. Yeah, better aces there are going to call me down too, but that's a close spot, but I think betting's a little bit better than checking. Lower right-hand table, we stacked the rec before anybody else did. The game doesn't have too much going on for it anymore. We're going to shut this table down and put something new in there. We open King-Queen on the lower left-hand table from under the gun. Fold Queen-9 in the small blind. It's a 3-better fold spot, the lower right-hand table. Upper right-hand table, Ace-9 suited, is a standard button open. Six-five deuce two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet small after he checks to us. That's probably not solver approved, but I think I'm going to get away with it because of a lack of check raises from this guy. He's going to have a lot of middling on-paired high-card hands that can't continue for one barrel, much less 2 or 3 if I find a way to put a few more in somewhere else. Upper left-hand table, blind down blind, is a bit interesting. 3-deuce suited is a bit outside of standard open range, at least if I'm assuming everyone's playing something like a solver would. This guy's been fairly loose and fairly aggressive, so I'm going to go ahead and not expand my range and be a little on the snug side and fold it. If you wanted to open it, I don't have a major problem with it. We will open King-8 on the button and shuffle that table out after this. Against a check raise with just overcards and a weak single, one-card backdoor flush draw, I'm going to go ahead and fold the King-Queen. I'd fold with backdoor spades, backdoor, or I'd call with backdoor spades, backdoor ace of diamonds type hands. We'll range bet upper left-hand table, Queen 10-9 rainbow. I've got some nice removal to the straights for later barreling purposes, having blocked Jack 8 and King Jack. And now we've got a club there, so we've got some. We also block 7-8 if that came along, and we block backdoor clubs. I've got most, if not all, the 7-8, at least the suited combos. I've got all the King Jack. I've got all the Jack 8 suited, some of the Jack 8 clubs. He didn't check raise. I've also got all the sets. He should have some of those check raised on the flop. I'm going to go ahead and use an overbet size here, especially with some nice removal to the real lock type hands. 2.5x open, we can go ahead and call with the pocket eights. You could 3-bet that as well. It's pretty close in this blind on blind spot. I'm going to go ahead and check back and not stab. I don't like the stab range in these blind on blind spots. I like to use about a half pot size, and I like to stab, you know, not real polarized like most of my top pair, or even some middling pairs that need protection. But I don't want to bet the eights, as a lot of 9x can be check calls in his range. I'd also be betting my draws and even hands with some good backdoor draw equity, you know, some backdoor diamond hands, some backdoor straight type hands. But I'll go ahead and check the eights back and look to evaluate. That's a pretty decent turn, is that the turn doesn't really help him improve over us with very many of his cards. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in a bet just to try to protect the my eights, you know, protect my equity in that pot. If he's got a 9x, I'm going to put in one bet on this hand, you know, with the worst hand somewhere anyway. But now I just don't want to let like random ace-jack type hands, weird 2 overcard type hands to go ahead and get a free one when you make those cards pay a little bit or fold out. And like I said, I'm going to put in a bet anyway if he's got a 9 or a king, you know, if we check back and he bets the river. He's mostly going to check to me and let me check back the river as played. So I'd rather put that one bet in on the turn when I can protect the equity a bit against some of those high card hands, either charge them or fold them out and now check back. I ended up getting value with pocket fours that just, you know, didn't believe I had much of anything for that one turn stab either. So I think that's a reasonable way to play the eights, even if it's prone to check raises against the smart, aggressive player that kind of knows what I'm up to. I'm not that worried anybody in the 200 no limit Ignition anonymous pool has got that much of a read on me that we're going to do things like that if I do that. So I think that's an okay way to play that hand. Blind on blind, upper left table, we're going to open the king-jack offsuit. That's standard. Probably open in about 45% of hands in that spot. You know, any offsuit Broadway, any offsuit 2 cards 9 or better, most of my offsuit aces, a few offsuit suited connectors, maybe a hand like king-8. All my pairs, all my suited connectors and one gappers, all my suited ace, kings, queens, maybe all my suited jacks or most of them, and then a smattering of other suited hands like 10-7, 10-6, 9-6, 9-5, 8-5, stuff like that. And of course, if we think the blind is fishy, nitty, passive, we can find reasons to expand our range and start playing a lot more hands than that too. But king-jack is obviously going to be an open blind on blind in essentially every scenario you're going to find in a cash game. Lower right-hand table, the under-the-gun player limps. We're going to go ahead and isolate with a pretty tight range, something like our under-the-gun open range, about 17%, but we can isolate them with ace-10 offsuit. That's probably our worst offsuit ace, but we can isolate with that. We get flatted in position. We're going to go ahead and check range out of position. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we face a 3x open. I'm actually going to go ahead and double check the lower right-hand table. I haven't hit the ace. Just look to get him to overvalue something or, under-rep my hand to get called on the river. I'm going to go ahead and check call the ace, obviously, now on the turn and check again on the river. I'm going to 3-bet a few random suited janky hands in this blind down blind spot, but I think flatting queen 5 is fine. Got a little bit of backdoor equity there, although not a much. I'm going to go ahead and check it back. And we'll just call that little $1 bet. We're not going to do anything crazy and check raise, expecting to get called by too much worse. And we'll fold with no real equity here on king 8, king, jack, king on the turn, picking up the backdoor flush draw. Blind on blind, lower left table, we can expand our range, having no reason to think the big blind is sufficiently aggressive to punish us for opening too wide. Upper left-hand table, 2.5x open for upper right-hand table, 2.5x open for middle position, button min raise to 5, really nothing to do but cold 4-bet or fold. I'm not going to be flat in there with the under the gun player or the middle position player still to act. So I'll fold my ace 4. Jack 5 and the cutoff on the lower left-hand table is a fold. Lower right-hand table, a recreational player who's been tight opens for 3x on the button. We're just going to 3-bet this up, almost like a 4-bet or fold range. I'm going to go a little bit smaller just because he's so small and give the illusion there might be a smidge of fold equity. I'm going to go to 12 as opposed to 13.5. I'm going to be stacking off with 10s or better against this guy. 10s or better is my usual stack-off range against a button open when I'm in the blinds. We flop quads, so nothing to do but just go ahead and trap when there's only a pot-sized bet left behind. This guy's been nitty and passive, but he's also short, so those two factors cut the opposite directions. Check call, obviously, here. The nittiness means we get away with raising to call off a lot less hands, but the short stack means we're punished a lot less when we run into a pair into a higher pair. So I was just, basically saying I'm still going to stack off 10s or better against that guy. Showing that he had 8s, that indicates 10s would have been a fine hand to play with. I would have had a few big suited card bluffs in there, but not too many, given how little money he would have had to shove into that pot to put me all in. There wasn't going to be too many hands I was going to raise fold. I have a few just for the sake of, giving the smidge appearance of being balanced, but it wouldn't have been very many in that spot. It would have been mostly hands I was raising to stack off, And truth be told, even the ace-queen type hands that are typically bluffs in that spot, those might end up even becoming hands that I raise and call off for such a small stack size, even though he is on the passive side. This is a weird blind down blind spot where it just checked all the way through. These check bet lines tend to be pretty over bluffed. I'm considering hero calling with king high here against a reg type player that could have all kinds of stuff in his range. The check bet line is very bluffy. The pot size bet not necessarily so much. It's close, but I'm going to do it. You could have all kinds of weird random stuff. Fold to the in position 3-bet with ace-6 suited. Going to open the button, the upper right-hand table with ace-5 off. Blind down blind 7-4 is a little too weak to defend, absent some player read or pool read to the contrary. It's outside of a standard call or 3-bet bluff for me. Upper left-hand table will open the cutoff with a standard 28-ish% opening range, which of course includes ace-king suited. We get 3-bet by an in-position player for a large sizing, a 4x size. He's been active pre-flop 45-20 over 21 hands, has not yet 3-bet over, this is his first 3-bet in 9 chances to do so. That doesn't really tell us he's particularly passive pre-flop with 3-bets, especially with the otherwise active pre-flop stats. Even then, I'm not going to go ahead and be folding ace-king. I'm going to go ahead and 4-bet and call off with my ace-king, my queens plus, and my jacks. I guess 10s is kind of close, which way I would go. I think I would call off with the 10s. He jams. We're going to call off and see what we're doing. We're racing against queens. Pretty standard. And we lose the flip, but that's the way poker goes. I think that's a very standard hand, not much to talk about. The only thing that makes that even remotely worthy of conversation is his sizing. He's using that larger 3-bet sizing, which I'm seeing a bit more of. I'm not sure what's causing it. I think there must be some kind of coach or training material out there that's advocating for particularly large 3-bet sizes. I'm not sure exactly if there's really merit to it or not, but I am seeing a bit more. All I know is that all it does is make me inclined to 4-bet a bit more and call a bit less. So, not sure the exact strategy, but the response to it's nothing too hard to figure out. Now, in the lower right-hand table, our button opens, gets 3-bet to a small size, about 3.5x by the small blind player. We're going to go ahead and defend this very, very wide with suited connected type cards, including 9-7 suited. Against a reg, we're probably going to defend very wide. Now he bets, and he bets large on the flop, but with the open-ended straight draw, backdoor flush draw, we're obviously not going anywhere for the 1-bet, so we go ahead and call. We're also deeper, too, which makes me more inclined to play a hand like this that could make something that really cracks his head if we get there. No reason to do anything but continue. We're going to keep flattening, our big hands like 10-8, 10s, 8s, and deuces as well, which could all legitimately be in our range. I'll probably have an overpair like jacks and some good pair of 10s type hands too. Go ahead and call that. River the nuts, easy game. My life is wonderful. He checks to me. We're probably going to go ahead and bluff this river a ton with our whiff diamond draws. We're obviously going to go ahead and move all in with our sets that we're playing kind of slow and trappy. Nothing to do but just all in for pot. Upper right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and use ace-queen offsuit as our 4-bet in this spot. And we got insta-folds against both of those, against our 4-bet and against our river jam. So he was probably doing that pretty weak given how quickly he did that. He didn't really consider bluffing too much on the river. He didn't consider calling off when I jammed on the river. It's not like my hand is that obvious that I'm sitting on a straight. Under the gun open, short stack, 3-bets to 2.5x from middle position. I think the move is just going to be to 4-bet and get it in against the short stack here with pocket queens. Lower right-hand table, a 3x open from the cutoff. Jack 10, especially with him being passive, I can just go ahead and fold my Jack 10. We're going to go ahead and get this in against this short stack for 40 blinds with the queens. He shows me ace-king. We're running another race. And it looks like we're going to lose this one too, but I'm fine playing that hand the way we did. Just I'm not folding queens for 40 blinds to a short stack in really any formation. So we're losing the all-ins, but otherwise playing solid, and that'll take care of itself in the long run, so I'm not going to sweat that. On the button, the lower left-hand table, Jack 8 offsuit is probably a bit wide, a bit outside of my standard open range, but these blinds haven't shown themselves to be particularly loose or aggressive, so I don't see any reason not to go ahead and expand my range and open with that. If you were going to fold it, you're trying to play a real solver-oriented GTO-type frequency scenario from the button, I don't hate that, but I think it's okay to try to expand your range some when the blinds haven't been 3-bet happy or very loose. Even though I got 3-bet here, I think my play was fine. Now that he 3-bets me, just going to go ahead and fold, of course. Lower right-hand table doesn't really have much in the way of rec-looking players, so we can go ahead and get out of that table next chance we get. Against the cutoff open, we're going to 3-bet, probably about a 10-11% range. King, queen suited is going to be part of that. We're not calling anything. We're just 3-betting or folding. Jack 8-6 two-tone. We're going to go ahead and range bet. We've got some backdoor straight draws, backdoor flush draws, some overcards. We've got some ways we can get out of this hand if we get called. The turn 8, however, is not great for us. We really don't have any 8s in our range except for pocket 8s, which can go ahead and trap. We probably also trap our jacks. I think I'm going to check very high frequency on this particular turn card, having not picked up any equity. Good hands to continue betting would be hands like 9-10, as that's going to be in my range, the suited combinations of it. I guess you could talk me into maybe betting some hands like Queen 10 with a gut shot. And I could, for value, I think the best hands to continue betting for value are going to be the overpairs like queens and kings, as they're more vulnerable and don't block the Jack X top pair. I'm going to be betting a ton of even my Jack X top pair. Now that he bets out for pot, nothing to do but just get out of the way with my king queen. You know, I can have jacks and 8s there with some degree of traps. Against that pot size bet, I'm probably not really check calling much of anything. I'm gonna check raise all in at that point with my quad aces, my jacks full, just to not give him a chance to get off the hook and check back the river once he puts that much money in the pot. And it's not like I really check call very many hands either that are more marginal. So I'm just gonna check jam him with my jacks full, my 8s, my aces that could check to trap that turn. And I guess some of my Jack X gets close. Some of my one pair type hands, folding those seems a bit on the weak side, especially Ace Jack. Those probably end up getting check raised all in for the most part there on the turn. You know, show me your 8 or show me your flop set. I'm not going to give you credit, especially when you're using such a wonky turn bet size in there. You really have no reason to bet pot on the turn as played. You can threaten my entire stack with a much smaller bet size. There's no reason to risk that much with your turn stab. So I think he's probably overplaying hands there, which makes me more inclined to stack off with my stuff that's closer, my marginal one pair Jack X type hands, or any other overpairs aside from Ace that I check the turn with as a trap or to sort of under rep or slow down on a turn card that's not great for me. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open pocket 9s, blind on blind. Upper right-hand table, we're going to open ace-10 offsuit. We're not going to isolate this presumed recreational limper with 5-7 suited. It's a little bit too loose to go after him with. Although if you were doing it on the aggressive side, thinking you're not going to get re-squeezed too much, granted, these blinds have been reasonably loose and reasonably aggressive, so I don't know that it's a great argument in this particular scenario, but if that argument existed, it would be a good argument to use that hand as an isolation hand. Or plus the fish is going to play pretty poorly post-flop. The fact that he's not fully stacked is an argument against using a kind of weak implied odds type hand like 7-5 suited as well. 8-7's a bit loose to isolate an under-the-gun limper, but once again, if you were to do that for a lot of the same reasons I was just talking about in this upper left-hand table spot, you could talk me into that as well. It's a bit looser than my standard isolation range against an under-the-gun limper, though. Upper right-hand table, we open king-jack suited from the button. We're going to go ahead and range bet queen 5-5 or queen 5 two-tone with the flush draw. We can expect some queen X in his range as well as some middling pocket pairs. I think what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to go ahead and use a small bet on this to charge these small pocket pairs, especially small pocket pairs with a heart. Queen X is obviously not going anywhere for one bet, and I still have the option to overbet lots of rivers if I want with my flush. I've got some Queen X trips, especially without a heart, that want to bet. I probably want to bet small and string along a hand like 9-9 with the heart, which could be in a small blind cold calling range there. I think I'll use the more standard, smaller, 2/3 type bet in this scenario. The only hand I'm really too worried about, having gotten really strong there on that river, is now going to be, an 8. I think he could have some queens, though I do block. I block some king-queen. However, the king-queens most likely to call are going to be the suited king-queens, and I don't block any king-queen or queen-jack suited as the spades are in my hand, or the hearts are in my hand and on the board. I think there's some merit to actually going ahead and overbetting this all in. The only hands I'm worried about having me beat are 8s and 5s full. That's 6 combos. If I can get called, and I guess you could have a few better flushes, But if I can start getting called down by some king-queen type stuff, queen-jack type stuff, especially if it has the offsuit combos, I think there's a lot of merit to an overbet here. I'm going to go ahead and 2x overbet, not all in. I think all in might make him find a few more folds with some marginal non-flush, non-boat type hands, but I do want to overbet there with my hand being so strong and without being that scared of boats on that particular run out. I guess you could talk me into a smaller bet to get milk, to milk some more value out of these marginal middling pairs as well. But I think overbetting when you're that strong is also never too bad of an idea, because you can't get big value with your big hands unless somebody puts a lot of money in. Upper right-hand table, we're going to shuffle out as it's looking pretty reg-infested, but we are going to open pocket eights here from middle position before we do. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, that king-9 spades is going to be a very standard open. And we're going to range bet the upper right-hand table, the ace-jack-jack monotone, or rainbow board, rather. We get called. We would continue betting. We'd probably trap aces full and quad jacks. We continue betting our strong jacks, pretty much all of our jacks, to try to, get aces in a lot of trouble. I think I would be checking back most of my ace-x, even ace-king. What I'm really looking to do is get value, if I've got trips, to put the ace-x in a bad spot and start overbetting, and in the end, I can also overbet my flush draws, especially my combo Broadway draws with flush draw. On the river now, I do have aces full, queens full, and jacks full. For me to bluff, I'm really mostly just trying to bluff out a pair like ace-x. I don't think I can do that without overbetting. I'm trying to think what hands are in my range. I may be better off just showing down my ace to try to beat a hand like pocket sevens and lower. I'm going to have some hands like jack 10, or I'm not jack 10, like 10-9 type hands that can go ahead. 10-9, king-9 type hands that can go ahead and use as bluff. I want to use those as a bluffs in my overbet range. I'm pretty much just going to be overbetting aces full, queens full, jacks full, and maybe some jack-x that whatever reason I trap with on the turn. I'm not going to be using a smaller bet unless I'm getting, particularly exploitive with the ace-king, ace-queen. I'd probably use a smaller bet with those. But I'm just going to check back my eights and take my showdown. Yeah, see, I'm not trying to fold him off an ace-x there unless I'm using the overbet size. I don't want to be bluffing very much for a smaller size. I think that's probably a waste. I don't think that accomplishes very much. Lower right-hand table, we open kings from middle position. Get called by player that seems to be a weaker reg type. He's played 21-9 over 34 hands. Too much cold calling, not enough 3-betting. No 3-betting from him, in fact, so far. Well, I'm not going to quite call him a wreck or a fish, but I'm going to call him a weaker reg. So we're going to go ahead and range bet on that 10-3 deuce two-tone. Upper right-hand table, 6-5 suited is a bit loose to open from middle position, so I'm going to muck it. Some players mix it in at some frequency, and it's not the end of the world. I, for the most part, just fold it, though. Haven't been to this table long enough to know that there's a fish in the blinds or anything like that. If the in-position players are not 3-betting you enough, and you know that for a fact, and especially if you're getting a fishy player in one of the blinds, and particularly the big blind, that's a good reason to go in there. But absent of some kind of reason like that that makes me expand my pre-flop range, I'm just going to go ahead and primarily fold that hand from an earlier spot. Lower right-hand table, we get a middle position open for 3x from a player that's been on the tight side. I'm actually going to treat him a bit more like an under-the-gun open and not defend as widely. However, I am still going to be calling the suited aces that aren't 3-bets, so we're going to go ahead and call ace deuce suited. Upper right-hand table, queen 3 suited is a fine hand to open on the button. And the upper left-hand table, 8-7 suited's right on the cusp of a middle position open. I'm going to go ahead and fold it, but if you wanted to open it, not the end of the world. Very, very close. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and check range. After defending the big blind, we do have an overcard and a backdoor flush draw. He checks back the turn, or checks back the flop. We get to the turn. This particular player is probably not extremely loose, as I talked about, given his middle position open and his very tight tendencies. Because of that, I think he's probably going to have more, and the check back on the flop tells me he's probably splitting the range a decent bit and checking back lots of middle pairs or pocket pairs worse than kings, maybe even some weak kings. I'm not going to get too nuts and try to bluff him off that range like I might otherwise do, just because I think his range is very, well, not nutted. I think it's very, very defined and very strong. And if he really is the kind of hands that I want him to fold out, queen 10, queen 9, they should probably be betting somewhere anyway. And if he has them, I beat them already. So I don't really benefit a ton from bluffing here. Ace queen, I may not fold out even if I bet the turn and the river. I think it's okay to surrender every once in a while in a spot like that where a range is narrowly defined, probably thought to be reasonably strong, and a guy might get pretty sticky with it. Now, if I had no shot on value, if I had some suited connector I defended with, I'm just going to start blasting because those can't win without a pair no matter what. But the ace high that's going to win, occasionally if the guy is, the kind of hands I get to fold on anyway, I already beat, so I don't benefit too much from the bluff. I think it's okay to finally take the foot off the gas every once in a while in that particular spot and not start bluffing him with a hand that just doesn't benefit all that much from bluffs. Lower right-hand table, a middle position player opens for 2.5x. We're going to play 3-bet or fold from the small blind. We're going to 3-bet an 8 or 9% range in this formation. Probably 8s plus suited broadways, ace 5, ace 4 suited, ace king, ace queen off. Ace king, of course, obviously that's going to be a part of the 3-bet range pretty much all over the place. I can't think of a spot where I don't 3-bet it. You're going to have to get pretty convoluted with your assumptions and facts to come up with a spot where I don't recommend 3-betting the ace-king. King, queen, 9, two-tone. I'm going to go ahead and bet out small to start with, but I don't really love that board. I mean, I have a lot of good hands in my range, but ace-king is actually a little bit on the weaker side, especially if he starts continuing or chucking a bunch of money in. I'm not saying I'm finding a fold necessarily at some point in this hand with top pair, top kicker, and a 3-bet pot, but on that particular board, I've got sets of kings, sets of queens, sets of 9s, and the nuts straight, as well as king, queen suited for those combos of top 2 pair. I've also got king, jack, and king 10 for top pair with the gut shot, queen, jack, and queen 10 for second pair with the gut shot, hands that block the real nuts. And I do have some flush draws, some combo draws like ace, jack, ace 10. Ace, jack, ace 10 with the clubs. So I've got a lot going on even without the ace-king. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet middle position from the button with king, queen suited. And on the top right-hand table, we're not going to do it with the 8s. That's probably just outside my 3-bet range, but it's pretty close. I'm looking for a table with more obvious fish because I've got everything else up and running right now, and I feel like I can probably find some wrecks somewhere along the way. So I keep closing out that one table that's all got full stacks that appear to be regs at first glance. If I can't get something with obvious fish right off the bat, I'll keep it, but I'm gonna shuffle it out a few times first before I give up on finding a table that's more evidently good. Recreational player limps his cutoff. We're going to isolate him quite a bit, but not with 6-4 offsuit. Even though that guy is going to be both weak with his range and weak with his post-flop skill, or at least those are reasonable things to assume based on the fact that he's playing 70 blinds deep and he's limping his cutoff, it still doesn't mean you can just start playing hands like 6-high offsuit against him and just bully him off completely. You still have to have some semblance of equity and just poker fundamentals to beat these guys. You know, the way you exploit weak players is by playing, you know, reasonable ranges in position against them. You don't want to start isolating too much. It leaves yourself too prone to these guys going ahead and to re-steal against you. There's no reason to get that loose. I'd use something like a cutoff isolation, or cutoff RFI range to isolate him from the button right there. Now he raises first in from under the gun. I think 10-9 is just a bit too loose to go ahead and 3-bet him with, so I'm going to go ahead and let that one go too. But I definitely am looking for reasons to get in the pot with that guy because I'm sure he is not very good just by all those pre-flop open limps and his shorter stack. Still not finding a table. I may give up on it pretty soon, but I'm going to try once or twice more for something that looks more evidently fishy and full of wrecks. Lower right-hand table, we got a middle position 3x open. We're on the big blind. This player, no reason to think he's anything other than a standard type player so far through a couple of orbits. Nothing real evident that he's a fish, that he's particularly loose or particularly passive. He hasn't 3-bet yet, but he's been fairly active with the VPIP and pre-flop raise. Upper left-hand table, ace-king is going to be open under the gun. We're going to 3-bet our big blind with a standard 3-bet range from against the middle position opener, probably about 8%. Something like 10s plus, suited broadways, ace-king offsuit, ace-5, ace-4 suited, and a few suited 9s. We're going to go ahead and bet range small on jack 7-4 two-tone, looking to keep getting some money in on most turns with the aces. The 10 is not a great card for us as 8-10 gets there, as does jack 10, but we're still ahead of tons of stuff. You know, trapped over pairs like kings or queens pre-flop, all sorts of top pairs. There's still all kinds of flush draws or pairs plus gut shots that haven't gotten there yet. So we're just going to go ahead and keep betting for half pot. Upper right-hand table against the 3x open on the button, we're going to go ahead and call with the 5s. Against the 3x open, probably a bit too loose to 3-bet it. The river is interesting. I'm not too worried about about the Broadway straight because that doesn't float the flop all that often. I'm a bit worried about the flushes. You know, we've got top set. I don't want to check fold this. I'm not really sure between check and bet on that particular river card. I don't think he's got a lot of just pure natural bluffs on paired hands left. I think he's more likely to hero me with some kind of jack and a flush draw blocker than he is to bluff with stuff I beat. So I'm going to move them all in, try to get hero called. It worked out. I mean, some of the times I'm jamming into a flush right there. You know, but I don't want to give a hand like Jack King, especially with one diamond, a chance to check back. I want to give a hand like that a chance to hero call going, I've got a decent pair. Oh, and he actually had a set of 7s, so I was walking into trouble the entire way until that river. So even though the river was kind of scary, the river made my hand good. My life is getting a bit better here later in this session. The deck's working out a bit nicer for me than we started, so I will gladly take a set over set in the 3-bet pot. I like the way he played his hand. I guess the only question might be if you defend that pre-flop or not against the 3-bet. But once you get there on the flop, you of course don't fold, and I like the idea of flatting in position with that strong hand to give me a chance to keep barreling off, because that's going to happen some of the time, or I may overvalue a worse hand as well. You know, on that particular texture, once the way the board runs out in the river like that, I'm probably not value betting too many worse hands. I guess they might have a few 2-pair combos in my range you could talk me into it. But for the most part, I'm going to be looking to value bet my sets, my straights, or my flushes. But you know, he doesn't know that river's going to hit that way. I like the way he plays by not blowing me off my hand when he's got that set in the 3-bet pot. The deck was just kind of cruel to him and gave me an overset on the river, which he has no way of knowing is coming and shouldn't happen most of the time. So unlucky for him, but to my benefit, so I will gladly take it. Upper right-hand table, the cutoff, we're going to open our pocket jacks. Pretty standard, nothing more to talk about there. The 6-4 suited would not be in a standard cutoff open range for me, though, in the lower right-hand table. Upper right-hand table, we're going to check range out of position on the ace, queen, deuce. Not a great hand, not a great board for our jacks. And also not a great turn card that another overcard is PL, but we now at least have a gut shot. I often jab or, probe into these turns small here after everyone checks the flop. I don't really fold out any pairs by doing that. I don't really get called by too much worse. I'm just going to go ahead and check this. Against a healthy bet, I'll even just check fold this. I can check around to the river and showdown against, a lot of his middle pairs like, 10s, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, or 3, almost all those pairs are in his range that I beat. And I'm happy to just not blow them off and just keep that pot small. Against that 2/3 bet on the turn, it may feel a bit weak, but I mean I've got all kinds of pairs of aces, kings, or queens, especially those with a gut shot with a 10 or a jack kicker that can go ahead and call that as well. I don't need to call this. I'm just going to go ahead and fold. We are blind on blind with aces again against the guy we just did real dirty an orbit ago. We're going to go ahead and open that. Just use a standard open in this spot. We could maybe expand our range a bit wider because he hasn't been aggressive pre-flop. Now we get 3-bet a little on the small side. Let me see here how I'm going to play my range against the 3-bet blind on blind, especially against it being a bit smaller. A standard blind on blind stack off is probably 10s plus ace king blind on blind. That may get slightly tighter because the 3-bet's slightly on the small side. Although it may get slightly wider because this player has been a bit aggressive and perhaps a bit tilted. Either way, aces is in there. I think I'm just going to treat this as a 10s plus ace king stack off range and maybe use ace queen offsuit and a couple wheel aces as my 4-bet fold hands, my 4-bet bluffs. Is they've got good removal to the 5-bet jam range or the 4-bet call range and also play reasonably well on a 4-bet pot as they can either flop big draws or big pairs. So I think that's a reasonable way to construct my range pre-flop and to respond to that blind on blind 3-bet. We'll keep this table we just popped up here. Full stacks, but I've been trying to find a table with anything that doesn't have all full stacks for a while. We'll play a couple orbits and see if any of these full stacks are showing us that they're not that sharp. We got a button open, a weakish player in the lower right-hand table calls in the small blind, and we're sitting in the big blind with king 10. With the other player calling, robbing us of some of our post-flop equity, I go ahead and defend that a bit tighter. Absent something a lot more sophisticated, I'm just going to go ahead and use like a cutoff defense range as far as my calls go. I'm still going to squeeze about as wide as I would without this small blind player in there. But king 10 is just going to be a defense either way, even if I'm getting tighter with the small blind caller in there. Upper left-hand table, we open aces from the cutoff, and that's obviously standard and took the pot down. Nothing interesting going on there. Flop checks around, lower right-hand table, 7-5-4, two-tone. The top pair pairs up the 7 and puts a backdoor flush draw out there. Small blind bets into it for half pot. We don't have a whole lot in the way of strong equity or draw. We're just going to go ahead and get out of the way multi-way. Lower left-hand table, we're going to play 3-better fold from the button against the under the gun open. We're going to 3-bet pocket 9s. That's probably our worst pair that we 3-bet, but it should be in our range. It's probably about an 8.5% 3-bet range, 9s plus ace, king, ace, queen, king, queen, a couple suited wheel aces, and then some suited Broadway hands. Not quite all, but most. Go ahead and range bet on the ace 10-9 or ace 10-6 two-tone board with our pocket 9s. Range bet small. We can have aces, we can have 10s, we can have ace 10 suited, we can have ace, king, ace, queen, we can have ace, jack suited. Now, on that turn, that's an interesting turn completing the flush. Our flushes are really only going to be king, queen, king, jack, and queen, jack suited. We also have king, queen offsuit to bet the flush draws. I'd probably keep betting my 10s, my set of 10s. The aces could go either way. I think I probably want to bet my ace, king, or ace, queen with a heart, or without a heart, rather, to protect them. I'll check back the ones with the hearts. I'll check back my weak aces like ace 5, ace 4, just to try to show down. We're going to check on the lower right-hand table with multi-way action. Blind on blind, we're facing a raise. We're going to defend with queen 9 suited. We can have, like I said, the ace king of hearts in here very easily. That's probably our only real heart hand as played pre-flop to raise with. Pocket nines is just very weak, no heart. I don't have any reason to think that's particularly bluffy, so I'm going to go ahead and fold and not put a play on them. The blind on blind hand, upper left hand table, we're going to go ahead and float with our 2 overcards and backdoor flush draw in position against a half pot bet. We're going to stab a lot of turns. We're going to pick up some equity in a lot of turns with either diamonds, nines, or queens to give us a top pair. I think it's pretty reasonable to float there. I'm going to go ahead and check back just because I can get weak value out of a peeled overcard. I can still try to bluff the river if the river comes in for me. Lower right-hand table, going to check range out of position after opening the cutoff on the ace-9-8 two-tone board. Going to fold against that 3-bet with queen-8 suited. Check calling with my ace-10 top pair decent kicker on the lower right-hand table. I would have stabbed the river with my queen-9 had I gotten the chance to. When he bets into me and I've just got queen-high, I'm just going to go ahead and fold. He's betting again. I've got top pair. I've also got the gut shot. He's been reasonably aggressive and reasonably loose pre-flop as well, so I think there's no real decision to go ahead and call here, or no real decision to do anything but go ahead and call. I don't want to go ahead and fold with top pair. The river is where it starts to get kind of tricky. Now, the 8 is probably not too bad a card for me. He's probably not barreling too many single pair 8 hands on the flop and the turn. He bets small. He might be kind of fishy with that pre-flop range, pre-flop gap between his VFIP and pre-flop range. Fish are particularly bluffy for this particular size, only about a 40% sizing. Even though it's bet, 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 and even though it's an ace-high flop, that does eliminate a good bit of it. Regs in the pre-flop call range for this size are also a bit bluff-heavy. However, I'm just not that willing to give him credit for a better hand when he uses that smaller size like this. So we're going to go ahead and call it down. Yeah, we're beat some of the time, but that's okay. We're supposed to be beat a good bit of the time, especially for the price that we're getting. We'll open king-10 from middle position on that table. We'll fold ace-5 suited against the 3-bet. We're going to check range out of position on the jack-10-10 two-tone on the upper right-hand table. And we're going to check fold to that decently sized flop stab without any real backdoor equity. Six-nine suited is a little bit too loose to open in middle position. And we're going to fold the king-10 offsuit. That's an easy fold to an in-position 3-bet, especially since king-10 is towards the bottom of our opening range for middle position anyway, which is always good business. If you're sitting with the start of, towards the bottom of your open range and face a 3-bet, that's probably one of the hands you're going to be folding, even without having a real great grasp on your range. Is a good concept to keep in mind. Going to open ace-8 suited from middle position in the upper left-hand table. We're going to check in against the small blind limp completer, blind on blind in the lower right-hand table. Against the check, we've got second pair, gut shot, monotone board. I'm going to go ahead and stab this for half pot. Just we likely have the best hand. We protect our equity against overcards, random diamonds, kind of things. If he's got a hand like queen jack, no diamond, I either want to fold it out or make him pay to continue a little bit. Now that we don't really pick up any more equity, we don't hit trips, we don't complete our straight, I'm going to go ahead and check back and evaluate the river. That's a pretty decent river for us, as a matter of fact, as it doesn't really improve anything for him that didn't already beat us on the turn. Trying to decide if there's any merit, try to get value with this hand. I think it's probably a little on the thin side for against a fish. I'm not sure that he really calls me with ace high. I'm not sure how much 4x he has. He can back into some 10x. He can have some 8x that plays that way. It's close, but we lose to most 5x as well. I'm just going to check this down. I think it's a little bit too weak to try to stab a little more value out of. We'll check it down. He had a queen jack, which he really should have bluffed on the river with if he was going to call the flop like that, but as I've said many a time before, the fact that they're recreational players means they do things like that that don't make sense. If he's gonna check call with queen jack there, first of all he should raise it pre-flop, no doubt. He shouldn't really limp in with that. He should raise it pre-flop. And if he is going to limp it pre-flop, and he is going to check call the flop, he needs to bluff the river. He just doesn't have any real showdown value at that point. And depending on his sizing and exact the cards that run out. He can put my mid-lane pair that bet that flop into a bit of a tough decision if he bets. So, and he really does not win at showdown there ever, because anything I have that doesn't beat queen high is going to bluff him again. So I don't think he played that hand well at all, but I don't think that's very controversial. I think that's pretty straightforward. Upper left-hand table, blind down blind, 8-7 opens, a pretty standard open towards the bottom of our range, but a pretty standard open blind down blind range. We could also expand our range and do that more, as he hasn't been that aggressive pre-flop, even though he does go ahead and 3-bet me quickly this time. That recreational player opens for 3x in middle position. We're going to play 3-bet or fold, which of course includes ace-king suited, probably about a 10% range. Upper left-hand table, king-8 suited is going to be a standard button open, though towards the bottom of the standard button open. Probably not expanding our button range too much. The blinds are actually showing themselves to be reasonably aggressive at this point, both pre-flop, raise first in, VPIP stats, and 3-bet stats. The recreational player calls me. We flop Jack 10-6 rainbow. We're going to go ahead and range bet small. Upper right-hand table, we get a cutoff open. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet from the small blind. Any hand we don't fold. We're going to include king-jack suited in that range, probably about a 10-11% range. We're going to go ahead and continue barreling for half pot to set up a river shove on the lower right-hand table. We have good removal to ace-jack, king-jack, so we can bully him off the best river call-down hands if need be. We also have 2 overcards and a gut shot for plenty of equity, so I think that's a good hand to be considering triple barreling off with. And even though he's a fish, that doesn't mean I'm not going to find a way to put in some big bluffs against him, just because he gets to the river with a lot of marginal stuff that really shouldn't be putting in that 3rd bet and puts him to a tough decision. And we, of course, still have our big hands. We've got a set of 10s. We've got our overpairs that are all, for the most part, barreling. Jacks might trap some, but will be in our betting range some as well. We've also got Jack 10 suited, so we have a ton of strong hands that just want to take all his money if he wants to call us down with, and if he wants to try and hero us off with one pair, especially when we have such great removal to the best top pair hands. I think that's a very reasonable way to plan that hand out. Upper right-hand table, we raised the button first in with ace-king. We got flat called by the big blind and an ace-king 5 rainbow board. The big blind check calls our small range bet, and now we peel an 8. On the turn, we have sets of aces, 6s, and 5s. He really shouldn't have any aces. He could have the 8s, because those don't always 3-bet pre-flop and mostly check call the flop. The 5s and 6s could check raise the flop some, but would also check call some on a relatively dry board. So we're not that certain that he doesn't have sets. He could have 7-9. We probably don't have a ton of 7-9 offsuit. We do have all 7-9 suited. We've got some 7-4 suited. I don't think there's a big nut advantage here. I think I want to bet a lot of my ace-x hands to get value from hands like 6-7, 5-7, 8-9, pairs with gut shots, pairs with straight draw type hands, or just weaker aces that don't want to blow off by putting in too bad a spot and getting folded out too early. I want to use the smaller bet size here based on that. So I'm going to be betting lots of my ace-x that don't want to give free cards to these pair plus gut shot type hands. The river is interesting. It completes a backdoor flush draw. It also makes any 6x hands that check called the flop twice now have trips and have outdrawn us. We're still ahead of hands like ace-jack, ace-10, maybe even some ace-queen. The real question is, do we think this guy is going to call us with enough ace-x to justify value betting our best ace-x? I'd like it better with the club as we block the backdoor clubs. It's tricky. It's very, very tricky. I know I don't want to overbet for value here. If I bet for value, I want to use the smaller size. It's very close, and I could get talked into checking back, but I also like trying to value bet. This guy could have a lot of ace-x in his range pre-flop. I think it's close, but I'm going to go ahead and try to go for the value bet. A check raise, I hate life because I know he backed into either he backed into a flush, he slow walked me with some kind of set, or he slow paid us straight on the turn. He hit the trip 6s. He can have plenty of better hands, so I'm going to give the check raise a ton of credit here, but I do want to try to get value. The 2.5x button up, we're going to go ahead and 3-bet our ace-jack from the big blind. Could be pretty close to a call, but I think it's primarily a 3-bet. We're going to go ahead and actually Board like this, let me see. We've got queens, we've got jacks, we've got nines, we've got the 10-8 suited, and we've got the king-10 suited. So we actually have a nice nut advantage here. However, that board does hit a ton of his range. I'm going to go ahead and range bet this. I have no idea if that's solver approved correct or not. But when in doubt, I don't know the difference. I use the range bet. I'm experimenting more with range checking, especially on connected monotone type flops out of position in 3-bet pots. But given that I have such a good, I'm so heavy on the nuts. I've got all the suited combos of the straights, both the high end and the low end. As well as all the sets, and the overpairs, and I've got a lot of king queen as well, and ace queen. I think it's okay to go ahead and bet that one out, though I do think it's a bit closer and worth looking into further. Lower right-hand table, I defended the big blind with 6-deuce suited. I think that's a pretty standard hand to defend with, blind on blind, unless I think the guy's particularly nitty. He's been nitty, but not so much I'm going to deviate too widely with suited cards in position. Mostly defend my suited cards in position, blind on blind, either for a raise or a 3-bet. On the flop, I flop middle pair and a flush draw. I felt like that was a decent board to stab at to protect my 6 from the overcards and also put some money in with my heart draws. I could be talked into checking that given that I've got some heart draws in a check back range, and that's got pretty good showdown value with the pair. You could go either way. It's probably pretty close. I opted to bet it. If you say you think checking is better, you're not going to hear much of an argument from me either. I think it's probably pretty reasonable either way. And of course, would be continuing had he bet into me on the flop. Lower right-hand table, we open jacks from middle position. With those two overcards peeling, I'm content to go ahead and check this back down. I'm not really trying to bluff him off a 9x or an overcard. I'm not really trying to get value from worse. I think this is just firmly in the check-back range. He's going to have this beat an awful lot by 9x that check called or overcards that check called and hit a pair, but I just don't think there's much merit in trying to move those hands off. I have weaker hands with less showdown value that I should use as bluffs instead. 6, I'm just going to show down, and I beat ace high, which probably shouldn't play the way it did, but it did. Lower right-hand table, I'm going to check range multi-way with one player in position. It's ace-10-9 monotone. We do have the relevant heart in our hand, which is good, so we're going to continue a lot more than if we didn't have that heart. Want to take a look and see if we can get a free turn card or at least a cheap call to the turn. The king is bad in that now an overcard peels. There's more better pairs than our hand, but we also have a gut shot. I think the move is to continue checking this particular hand. I'm not really trying to protect it from any sort of overcards. Either the jack makes straights for everybody, 4 to the straight, but it makes me a set, so it wins a lot of the time. The aces or kings are already out there and aren't bad cards because those already beat me, and the queen, which hits, makes me a straight. Given that we've got 4 to the straight, nobody's shown too much action. I'm going to be bluffing this card a lot, and I'm also going to be trying to bet my jacks a lot. On the 4 to the straight or flush runouts, I like the pot size bet, so I'm going to go ahead and bet that for pot and hope somebody doesn't believe me, thinks I'm stabbing at it. They've got a pair of aces, some kind of 2-pair stuff. I think that's a very reasonable way to play that river. Queen 5 is going to be a fold under the gun. Under the gun, we've got a 2.5x raise first in from a player that's been very nitty over 30 hands. He's playing 10-7. This is only his 3rd pre-flop raise in 30 hands. Against a standard under the gun player, against the 2.5x open, my 3-bet range is going to really bottom out at jacks or better. This guy being so tight, I'm actually going to deviate. I don't have any kind of good solver-supported data because I'm just not used to playing against a guy so nitty. I do know conceptually that means I defend tighter both with 3-bets on calls. I'm sure this seems tight, but I'm going to go ahead and call my jacks just because this guy has been so nitty so far, over 5-6 orbits, enough to really say that those pre-flop stats do have some meaning. 3-bet, of course, is not terrible. I just think flatting's going to be okay as well. Jacks are going to play fine multi-way as well, as a set of jacks is obviously a very strong hand. The texture I've gotten so far is not great either. I'm content to just be checking. I don't really fold out better pairs on that queen-jack-king board. by probing, and I'm not really worried about protecting equity because all the overcards have already hit. So I'm just going to go ahead and check this, and if I get a free showdown here, I'm cool with that. Ace-3 came in there. I could have maybe moved that guy out with the pre-flop 3-bet. I want to see what this guy opened as well. He opened pocket 2s, so perhaps he's not quite as nitty as his stats are showing. If you're really only opening 10% of your hands, you should be folding pocket 2s under the gun. Who knows, perhaps that sample is just variance, but that's reasonably representative of the fact that this guy is tighter than typical over 30 hands. If it were 10 hands, I wouldn't put that much stock in it. 10 hands could be almost anything, but 30 orbits is an awful lot of, 30 hands, 5 orbits is an awful lot of hands to not be raising anything yet, you know, as tight as he's been. Lower right-hand table, 2.5x open from a middle position player. We're going to treat it like a standard reg, opening that and respond with our standard response, about a 7.5% 3-bet range. Let's say 9s are better, suited broadways, a couple suited 9s like Jack-9, 10-9, Ace-King offsuit, Ace-5 suited. Something like that's a pretty good range to use in that spot. Blind on blind, we get a limper. Jack-8's kind of on the cusp of hands we'd isolate with. I'm going to go ahead and do that and isolate him. You could also check that, and I think that one's pretty close. You know, I like to isolate these limpers from, you know, the blind on blind limpers with roughly my button raise first in range, and Jack-8 offsuit's kind of on the cusp of that as well. We'll go ahead and range bet small on the King-10-3. We take it down, lower right-hand table, we're going to open Jack-9 offsuit from the button. That's going to be a standard open. We get called by the big blind. We get a King-9-5 rainbow board, so we're going to go ahead and check, or I'm sorry, not check, we're going to bet range small on that after he checks to us. We get called. The turn is interesting. We can have Kings, 9s, 8s, 5s. We can have King-9 suited and offsuit. We can have King-8 suited and offsuit. We can have King-5 suited. We can have 9-8 offsuit and suited. We probably have a bit of 8-5 suited as well. Let me see here. He really shouldn't have too much kings or too much 9s from pre-flop. But he could also have some 9s, some 5s. That board does coordinate and get his 6-7 there. I'm torn between overbetting and betting small. I think I would probably use a more standard size small bet on this board. So I want to bet my King-Queen, my Ace-King, my King-Jack, my King-10 type hands. And I have a lot of straight draws and flush draws to be betting, 7-10, 10-9. 9x is a pretty good check back hand regardless. I was going to look to get some cheap value, or some thin value rather, on the river had we got more of a blank. But for the straight out there, this hand is relatively lower in my range. I'm now more content to show it down. We lost to a weak king. I think we played that okay. You know, if it comes out an offsuit 3, I'd probably try to value bet my 9 and get some thinner value from checking it back, or I look to bluff catch a lot of rivers, you know, depending on what size he uses and what river comes out there. But I think that's a reasonable plan to keep the pot smaller with the 9s and move closer towards showdown. You know, I've got so many good 2-pair plus hands. I've got so many good straight draws and flush draws to be barreling with. Just that 9x with no real draw other than a 2-pair or trips type draw. I don't think that should be bet on the turn. I think that's pretty straightforward. Open queens in middle position on the upper right-hand table. Open queens in middle position on the upper left-hand table. Isolate kings against the cutoff limper in the upper right-hand table. When our middle position faces a small blind 3-bet for 4x, we're going to continue with the queens. You can go ahead and 4-bet these and get these in. However, I actually prefer calling a bit more often, especially against a player pool that's been a bit nitty and a player that hasn't 3-bet me at all in 15 opportunities, 57 total hands. We're going to go ahead and flat that. Opening 8s from under middle position in the lower left-hand table. Lower right-hand table, the queens get 4-bet. Out of position, we're just going to 4-bet that and get that in. Facing the half-pot continuation bet, we're going to go ahead and flat call the queens at least once, and we picked up a backdoor diamond draw, which is good for us. We take that down. We're going to check this back because we're not too worried about anything, any overcards peeling except the 3 non-diamond aces. You know, the king is already there, which beats us. On the lower left-hand table, we've got this small blind 3-bet. He bets about 4x. We can continue with pocket 8s against the player pool. That's an okay defense in position against that size. Now, the only decision over here, upper left-hand table, is do we try to value bet? I mean, we block king-queen, doesn't have too much king-queen, doesn't have too many kings or sets of jacks as played. I'm unsure though if he really starts calling me down with a hand like Ace Jack. If he starts calling me down with a hand like Pocket Tens, it's close. I'm going to check it back and take the free showdown. Yeah, Ace King can be playing cautiously there, especially with that third diamond having hit. I don't mind his play. I don't mind my check back play. Value betting somewhat close, but I think checking back there is okay too. With the set of eights, we called that quarter pot continuation bet. We're super strong. The board's not that drawy or scary. I want to let his his pair of tens or over pairs keep thinking they're good. I want to keep letting his bluff stay in there. I want to flat with my eights in position. I can still get plenty of money in on the river. The only hands that really improved over me now are sets of queens. I mean, sets of tens already beat me, or Jack 10 got there. I've got a set. I'm happy to call this off. He's got aces. We stack them. We're probably stacking them no matter what we do, whether we put in a raise at some point on that hand. But there's no sense moving his bluffs out of the way, and there's no sense not leaving my more marginal hands protected. I can still get all the money in with eights in position to 3-bet pot without putting the raise in anywhere. So I'm quite fine slow playing that in position, especially with the relatively smaller stacks because of the 3-bet pre-flop. Upper right-hand table, we've got Ace King in the cutoff. Ace King suited, of course, that's a standard open, so we put that in. We get called by a big blind who, he's probably a reg, but a very loose aggressive reg, 38-32 with 20% 3-bet over 38 hands. We're going to go ahead and range bet him small on Queen 9-4 Rainbow. Lower left-hand table, Queens is a standard open, blind on blind. Lower right-hand table, we've got, upper left-hand table, we have 10-8 offsuit, blind on blind, which is not a standard open, but he's been pretty passive, so we're going to go ahead and expand our range, and we get instantly folded to. Lower left-hand table, we're checking range out of position on the 8-6-6 two-tone. Our hand is very under-repped in this scenario with pocket queens. He goes ahead and min bets. I was going to check call more healthy size bets against the hand against this where I'm still vulnerable to kings or aces over cards. He could have various straight draws, various flush draws, or pairs of ace-x or middling pocket pairs that flat the flop. I'm not going to let him bet one on me. I'm going to go ahead and check raise him here with my queens. The smaller the flop stab, the more merge your check raises should be on the flop. If he bet 2/3, I would probably just check call. I'm going to go ahead and check to him now. The 9 is not great for my hand as it coordinates with any straight draws he might have had. And he bets 1 again. So I'm going to go ahead and check raise him again. I don't know what's going on here. This hand's getting really silly really quick. But he doesn't mess around anymore to the second check raise. That's a non-standard scenario, but it's a very weird scenario that he put me in as well. Upper left-hand table, we're going to check range with the multiple players, at least one of them in position. We got middle set. Upper right-hand table, we isolated the limper with Queen Jack, and we flopped top pair on Queen 4-3 two-tones. We're going to go ahead and range bet that small. On the turn on the upper left-hand table, after everyone checks, we're going to start stabbing this turn an awful heavily, especially with our set. We want to get some value in there, protect against a stray single diamond. Now, on the turn when the 4 hits, which pairs up second pair and also puts a flush draw out there, which we have a piece of, we have the jack of clubs. I want to check back because on the 4th club, I'm protected. I can call down with my pretty decent club. I can induce bluffs. I don't want to just run into flushes or trip 4s, and let him fold weaker stuff. I want to induce bluffs with my hand that still has showdown value. I think it's good to check back there. Against the 2, real small, looks like about a quarter size bet on the river. I've got a pretty good club. There's nothing to do but call down here. I don't think there's too much merit in raising. I'm not sure what he's doing there. I think if he's bluffing, he should put me all in. But of course, we're going to call. 3x open, lower left-hand table. We're going to defend with the ace-6 suited. 2.5x open on the button with ace-10 suited and the small blind caller. We're going to go ahead and steal with that, squeeze with that. That's going to be in a standard 3-bet range for us on the button. We don't deviate too much with the cold caller, at least as far as the 3-bet goes. We'll call less with the cold caller. Then we're going to go ahead and check fold the ace-6 on the 7-5-5 two-tone board with no real backdoor draws. Because we have backdoor straights, but I want to continue with the backdoor flush draw as well. especially against a guy who's shown to be aggressive and a little bit weird and is probably not going to give us too much credit if we start getting spazzy with him after that double check raise hand. You know, if you want to say you're going to call with ace high and that pivot to the straight, I don't hate that. I just opted to be a bit tighter, especially out of position where I don't have a good grasp on how I want to play this hand on a lot of later turn cards. Button or cutoff opens. We're sitting on the button. King Jack is a little bit outside of our standard pre-flop 3-bet. This guy's been, you know, not too many hands so far to take too much of an assessment, but he's been a little on the active side. If we're going to make any assessment, raised once already and then raised again in his fourth hand. This hand is just outside of hands we would really 3-bet with as a standard raise, button versus cutoff. So I think it's okay to expand and put a couple more in if I'm suspicious he might be a bit more active. We haven't 3-bet yet pre-flop, you know, so I think it's okay to do that. If you want to go ahead and fold it, I don't hate that either. I think it's pretty close. Lower right-hand table, king-queen offsuits and open under the gun. Upper right-hand table, I usually would isolate with something like my raise first in range from under the gun, you know, and king 10 is probably on the cusp of that. Given that the limper is very clearly going to be a fish, I'm going to expand and include that, but it's close. Lower left-hand table, button raise first in, even though he's been passive. Ace-queen suited is still clearly a 3-bet, even if we shift our range to be a bit tighter and treat it more like a cutoff open. I'm probably only 3-betting that guy 10 or 11% as opposed to like 15%, but I'm still going to 3-bet with ace-queen. I'm going to go ahead and range bet against the rec player on king-9 deuce after he limp calls pre-flop. Lower right-hand table, we're going to fold king-queen to the imposition 3-bet. Against the 2x RFI on the lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and defend, I believe. It's kind of on the cusp. This guy's probably on the loose side. I think it's going to be okay to do that, but it's close. Towards the bottom of our range, even against a min 3-bet. I'm going to go ahead and check this back, as we have lots of, that's one of our better 10s to check back, as it got showdown value. I can induce bluffs. I can under-rep my hand and get called by something goofy like jack-queen. So I think it's okay, and I really don't want to get check raised with that particular hand as well on the turn, as, you know, he's going to have a lot of nuts or some stupid 2-pair type hands. After the rec checks to me again, now I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at it like I would do with my bluffs and also try to value bet my little bit on the weaker side king. My plan worked out pretty nicely there. I got called down. Same table, ace-king offsuit under the gun. That's a standard open. He had queen-jack of clubs, so, you know, one of the hands I was thinking I could target for a value bet on the river there actually worked out to be exactly what he had, so that worked out pretty nicely. Always happy to see when specific hands I think can be targeted by the way I play my hand end up being exactly what pays me off, and that's where I steal an extra bet. I think a large portion of win rate comes from finding how you can steal these extra bets in certain spots on the river and how you get yourself to the river to do that in the first place. So even though it may seem small, I'm very happy about the way that hand played because I think a good portion of my win rate comes from those specific decisions. Lower left-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet after opening the button on the 9-5 deuce two-tone. Upper left-hand table, we're going to keep checking. We checked range on Jack 9-3 Rainbow. The Jack turn doesn't change too much. We're still either ahead or behind, just like we always were. This could really be him just trying to stab and protect a marginal hand like pocket eights. It's probably not a jack in that he probably bets the jack either on the flop or bets the turn stronger. I don't want to fold ace-king for the small bet, but I think given that regs in position tend to be weighted towards pocket pairs, and I'm just value cutting myself real small against these middling pairs, I'm going to go ahead and check range him and see how much heart he really has for this hand. And I'm probably going to follow through on the river. You know, you could check call that, but I do think all you're doing is check calling against a pair that's just trying to steal a small bet from you, and you punish him for trying to do that to you. You know, you occasionally get yourself into trouble with a guy that checked a setback on the flop or checked back a weaker jack, and now he's not going anywhere because he's got trips. But I think just such a large portion of his range is middle pocket pairs that didn't hit the board, that think they're good, that want to protect against a hand exactly like ace-king, ace-queen, which I've got. And then if I check call the turn, I'm going to check to him, and he's just going to check back the river unimproved. I'm not going to get a chance to value bet him, as I don't really have too much donking in my range after check calling the turn. Should I hit my pair on the river? He's really only going to bet if my assessment of his range is correct, and he's got a middle pair. He's really only going to bet that on the river if he fills up, in which case I'm never check raise bluffing him off of that, and he doesn't have a marginal hand that I can check raise bluff him off. So I think that check raise on the turn is actually pretty good, just based on how I view his range to be. And the crux of that comes down to reg-type players, of which he appears to be 20-10 with no limps over 10 hands. When they flat, especially in either the small blind or a position earlier than the button, or even on the button, anything out of a big blind for sure, their range is so narrowly defined and constrained for the most part to hands like middle pocket pairs and some suited broadways. You can get a good feel for what they're holding and why they might do that with their specific hands, and you can take advantage of them if you're clued into what they probably have and how they're probably thinking. 4x open from a recreational type player who's only playing about 60 blinds deep. We're just going to 3-bet this with the intention of getting hands in or folding to jams. Ace-7 suited is a bit too weak to even put in the 3-bet fold range, much less the 3-bet call-off range. Over here, small blind against an undergun open middle position 3-bet. That's going to be a 4-bet or fold range. We're going to be stacking off with queens plus ace-king and mixing in some bluffs. We're not going to be mixing in too many bluffs given the sizings that are at play. However, we're probably going to be mixing in a bit. We're probably going to be mixing in real tight. We're probably going to go queens plus ace-king to stack off, and maybe pocket jacks, ace-queen suited, king-queen suited as our bluffs. Very small bluffing frequency, but a few hands just for the sake of balance or the appearance thereof. Jacks, ace-queen, and king-queen suited all play pretty well post-flop should we get flatted. As they can make big pairs or big draws that I can stick the money in with. So I think those are reasonable combos to select, but I'm going to have very few folds if I jam back just because my range looks and should be super strong. So that's how I'm constructing in this scenario. We get flatted. We flop a pretty good board for our particular hand. We're going to go ahead and range bet everything. Like I said, we've got sets of queens, over pairs, kings and aces. We've got ace-king, which whiff, but we've got ace-queen and king-queen suited, which made top pair, and we've also got jacks, which don't love the queen out there. We do block aces, which is probably the most reasonable trap. He goes ahead and check calls us. Now, on that particular turn, we can have the ace-king of diamonds. We can have ace-king of diamonds for a flush draw, which probably wants to be jamming all in. We can probably trap with aces. I think I want to shove my kings all in to protect them. I'm going to trap with my sets of queens. I'm going to trap with my aces. I think aces is a better trap than queens, all things considered, just because we have that gut shot. I'm going to go ahead and trap ace-queen as well and see if he gets wacky with a draw or, overvalue something like pocket tens that needs to get value. Or needs to protect itself from weird ace-type things. And I think ace-queen, because I blocked the worst queens, is a better hand to trap with than pocket kings, which can get called down by a hand that paired up with the queens. And now on the river, I'm going to still have my aces and my queens to value bet and my ace-queen as well. So I have 6, 9, I've got 12 combos of value plus a bunch of ace-king that didn't bet the turn, which are going to be my bluffs. So I'm going to go ahead and jam all in with the ace-queen and see if I can get hero and make him think I've got ace-king that just gets desperate on this river. I'm not going to check fold with top pair, top kicker, and a cold 4-bet pot, especially with that much money in there. I'd much rather try to force jacks, tens, some middling pair, or worse queen into a bad spot and call me off and have to pay me off, and lend some balance to my ace-king that needs to bluff there as well, as it's my worst hand at that point. So I think that's a reasonable way to play here too. And we're also going to go ahead and shut down at the next blind. We played a much longer session than typical, but I kind of like the way things were going. I like my chance to get in some more hands right now. I usually play about an hour and a half to an hour and 45-minute session. This video and this session has been a bit longer, a little over 3 hours, so I hope you enjoyed the expanded video, and we still got another orbit or two to see if a few more interesting hands pop up. Early on, it was pretty brutal, but we stuck with it. We kept our mental state strong and kept playing tough, and the results have actually been pretty good. It looks like I'm up about a buy-in and a half on the session in actual cash, and I'm up pretty close to 3 buy-ins, EV adjusted for the all-in pots. You know, and a session like that is always going to be a good session. No one session's results mean that much or matter that much, but I always like to see winning sessions, especially big winning sessions, as opposed to losing sessions. So hope you stuck with the video during the tougher times in the earlier spots and got to some of the interesting spots where things went well for us later on. Upper left-hand table, we're going to open deuces from middle position. A little on the loose side, probably not truly solver approved, but I tend to adjust my ranges from those ever so slightly, even though I do tend to try to match solver frequencies, absent good reason to deviate. I'll mix the starting hands up a little bit more. I like some of these smaller pairs more than solver does, just because the pool doesn't 3-bet me enough to get me out of there with those pairs that can't continue and defend against 3-bets. And I like having sets in my range. They're just so powerful and so probable. When I have them, it lets me treat a lot more flops like I have a massive nut advantage than I otherwise would, because there's not going to be any flops where I don't have most, if not all, the sets. So I put those in there. Of course, me saying I don't get 3-bet very often gets proved absolutely incorrect on that particular hand as the button squeezes against the cold caller in the cutoff. But I still think that doesn't happen often enough to truly punish me for it. If you want to go ahead and say that's a bit too loose and I shouldn't do that, once again, you know, I can't argue with you. You're not even wrong. You're actually correct. It's more correct to not open those hands. But I put them in there for some reasons that I think I have my reasons. I think there's some basis for it, and whether you think those reasons are good enough, we can certainly debate those all day long, but that's why I do it. And as I said, not opening twos in that spot is not the end of the world, and certainly a very reasonable approach as well. And our last hand, Jack 4 into the gun, we're just going to go ahead and fold. That wraps everything up. That's the end of the session. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Charlie Murphy signing off, and thank you for watching.